Okay, thank you. Good evening and welcome to the 26th and final meeting of the Planning Board for the fiscal year 2020. I'm required to read a statement here about our virtual meeting. So in accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law relating to the 2020 novel coronavirus outbreak emergency, this meeting of the Milton Planning Board is to be held remotely utilizing the Zoom virtual meeting software. The login and call-in information is included on the agenda, which is on the screen right now. And the meeting is being televised live via Milton Access Television. My name is April Anderson. I'm the chair of the board. If we could go around, and maybe I should call everybody out. Cheryl.
Cheryl Tagayas, member.
Kathleen.
Kathleen O'Donnell, member.
Denny.
Denny Swenson, secretary.
We have Rich. No, okay. Allison.
Allison Quinn, assistant planner.
We have Julia tonight. Is that the 617 phone number maybe? She's muted. Is that you, Julia?
Let me see if it's.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Julia.
Hi.
Julia Getman is our clerk. So we're going to start off with a couple of administrative items. The first is our next meeting dates are scheduled for July 9th, July 23rd, and then July 28th, we have a special town meeting. Tonight, there was a legal ad that ran in the Milton Times where we were supposed to have a public hearing on our zoning articles for the July 28th town meeting. Had a misprint or an error in our ad, so that will actually take place at the July 9th meeting. So if anyone is called in for tonight for the zoning hearing, the public hearing on the zoning articles, that has actually been postponed to July 9th. So you can now go enjoy your evening. For July 28th town meeting, it was recommended by Cheryl, because we have a series of zoning articles, that it may make sense for us to follow the format that the Board of Selectmen has utilized for the last town meeting, the annual town meeting, and meet in person at Town Hall. We wanted to run that by the members and get your feedback on whether or not that was something you would be comfortable with doing.
I think it's a great idea. I think that I watched we all watched the town meeting the other night, and I think that it makes a lot more sense to have us all someplace rather than trying to do this format for a discussion. I don't see that happening very well.
How do you feel, Denny?
I'm happy to meet at the town hall or wherever you find a space.
And we would make the effort to be socially distanced, or whether it would be Town Hall or perhaps the Council on Aging. Is that what you recommended, Cheryl?
That's what they did. I think that's what the select board did. Is that right, Michael?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
The in-person meeting of the select board relative to the town meeting
Was that the Council on Aging?
Right. That's what I thought.
Yep.
Okay.
And
Thank
I would
you.
recommend I'd recommend meeting there. There's enough space. We split the gym into two, and then we have the side room for a third room, and then the computer lab is fourth. So if you wanted to, we could all, be in the same area.
Okay, so why don't we plan on doing that? If everybody's amenable and feels comfortable, so we can have an easier discussion if amendments arise. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes.
Okay, I'm ready to approve for May 14th of 2020, May 28th, June 3rd, June 4th, and June 11th, all of 2020, as amended.
I'd make a motion to approve the minutes as stated.
Any
Second.
discussion? No? We have a second? Any discussion?
Other than thank you to Julia for typing them up.
Yes.
Thank you, Julia.
Yes, thank you. Okay, then we need to do a roll call vote. So I'll start with myself. April Anderson, yes. Cheryl Tagayas,
Yes.
Kathleen O'Donnell,
Yes.
Denny Swenson.
Yes.
Yeah, let's just triple check. We don't have Rich yet. Nope, no Rich. I did hear from Rich Beeler, who is running late on a business call, and he'll be joining us as soon as he can. The next agenda item is a staff update. So I'll turn this over to Allison Quinn, who is going to update us on a few things happening in the planning office.
Sure. So I'd like to start with Judy Barrett had suggested that we try to reach out and get some more volunteers for the East Milton Square Steering Committee. And I'm happy to report that we've gotten roughly 20 people who are interested or have expressed interest in joining that steering committee. So I think it's a great opportunity to expand and get some more perspectives and get the ball rolling again. And the other staff update that I would like to share with you is the status of the 40Bs. We have gotten 3 letters. Sorry, glasses on. 582 Blue Hill Ave. The site approval letter issued to them gave them 118 units of rental housing and 30 affordable. The Ice House received approval letter for 56 units and 14 affordable of home ownership. And 648 Canton Ave's approval letter indicated that they would be allowed to erect 124 rental units with 31 affordable. East Milton Square has submitted a revision to their original 40B application. Their revised application includes 101 rental units with 26 affordable. They have also modified the design, the massing, and the layout on the site. And those are all available on the town's website.
And those are site eligibility letters for mass housing.
Correct. That is in response to the site eligibility letters. These are letters from Mass Housing giving them a site approval.
So this doesn't mean that these buildings can be constructed today. There's still several steps to go in a further application, but if
Correct. The next step for these is to go before the Zoning Board of Appeals. And then that will trigger a new process.
Okay, anybody have any questions? Anybody from the
Yeah,
board?
April, question?
Yeah.
So what's our next step going to be with the 20-some people who are interested in joining the steering committee for East Milton? Do we want to have Allison make a recommendation and have us review them? Or I'm just throwing it out there. How do we want to proceed?
Well, how many people are we hoping to add? Did Judy give us a number?
Not really. She didn't give us an absolute number.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've created a spreadsheet that indicates where people live, what their interests are. She had given us a list of different variables that she wanted to include. So elderly people, empty nesters, people who have kids, people who rent, and some people check some of those boxes, some don't at all. So I think maybe it's best to give the data back to Judy, and maybe she can make some recommendations for us. Does that make sense?
Is that okay with you, Cheryl? What I would suggest is that Allison and our consultant, Judy Barrett, put their heads together and review the list and come back to us with a recommended next step.
Sounds good to me.
I think that's a great idea.
Me too.
Okay. Then we're all in agreement so far. This is a great first meeting for me. So the next agenda item is citizen speak. So what I would ask the board, if everyone can kind of scan through the pictures, we have a mechanism to raise your hand. But if you are on video and you want to literally raise your hand, please do so. And we can call people as we see them. This is not the most eloquent approach, but I think if we can put at least 6 sets of eyes on our the folks joining us from the public, will have a better shot at seeing people if they want to speak. So let's open it up to citizen speak. And if anybody would like to talk on any issue that's not on our agenda tonight, we would invite you to do so now. I see a lot of people don't have the video on, which is fine.
April, if people want to comment and they can't access us by waving, phone in, and when they call it the *9, that's what Mike Lynch advised, that if they're having trouble and they're using the phone rather than the computer, they can hit *9 and they can, we'll know that they're trying to talk.
Okay.
Most people are on the app. There's a a raise hand feature. It's towards the bottom of your app, or if you toggle your mouse. It's a
Oh,
little-
Rich is with us.
Oh, great. Welcome, Rich. Okay, I don't see anybody raising their hand and I don't hear anybody dialing in, but I'm wondering if we should just, for the sake of extra precaution, is there an opportunity to just unmute everybody at one time and have someone speak up if they want to speak? Is that an option for us, Mike?
Yep, there is the option. I can, if you want, I can unmute all the
Yeah,
microphones.
let's do it, because I don't want to miss anybody who took the time to dial in. Thank you, everyone, for your patience while we sort this out.
Everyone's unmuted.
Okay. So now is your chance if anybody wants to speak during Citizen Speak. I see some people are self-muted, so if you're still muted, it's by your. Any takers? No. Okay. Then we can mute everybody again. The only folks who will be unmuted right now are the board and the staff. When we get to the chance to speak the public portion of the meeting again, we will unmute everybody again and you will have your chance, and we will take extra time to make sure nobody's missed. So the next meeting is the next item on our agenda is a public hearing that was scheduled for 7:05, site plan approval for 919 Blue Hill Ave for Little Sprouts. This was continued from June 11th, and I would ask Allison quick overview of the background and what we're doing tonight.
Sure. I did provide a memo. I'm having a little trouble navigating my newfound computer, so give me a second. It worked. So background, 17th, Attorney Ned Corcoran made an informational presentation on behalf of his client, Little Sprouts LLC, for a project for an early education child care center to be located at 919 Blue Hill Ave. The site plan approval application was filed February 4th, 2020. Public hearing for 919 opened on February 13th, 2020, and a planning board site walk was conducted on February 22nd, 2020. On June 11th, 2020, a redesigned project intended to meet the requirements of an as-of-right use was presented at a public meeting of the planning board. The redesigned project meets all setback and parking requirements of the zoning bylaw. The project is not seeking any waivers. You scroll down a little bit. Hold on. The project is covered by the Dover Amendment outlined in Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 3, that exempts agricultural, religious, and educational corporations from certain zoning restrictions. Dover Amendment projects may be subject to reasonable regulations concerning the bulk and height of structures and determining yard sizes, lot areas, setbacks, open space, parking, and building coverage requirements. Conditions site plan approval for the Milton zone are as follows. Protection of adjoining premises, convenience and safety of vehicular and pedestrian movement within the site and in relation to adjoining streets, adequacy of disposal of sewage, refuse, and other waste, and adequacy of drainage for surface water, adequacy of space for loading and deliveries, unit density and proximity of adjacent buildings, and adequacy of lighting. The planning board may reject any plan that fails to meet standards for health, safety, welfare, amenities appropriate for future occupants of a building or the adjacent properties or neighborhood. Requirements for planning board action. Ordinarily, the planning board has 65 days from the file of a site plan approval application to hold a public hearing, and decisions must be rendered within 35 days of the public hearing. However, the Chapter 53 of the Acts of 2020 told these timeframes. Town Department review. The planning board requested that the town engineer review the proposed project. On March 30th, 2020, the town engineer, John Thompson, expressed concerns with entry. After further review of the applicant, on June 18th, John Thompson followed up that his concerns had been satisfactorily resolved. On June 23rd, Dan Clark, representing the Fire Station Design Committee, expressed interest in exploring a motorized gate for the Atherton Street entrance to the fire station. In response, on June 23rd, Ned Corcoran and Little Sprout LLC proposed a traffic parking study after 3 months of facility operations Dan Clark of the Fire Station Design Committee and John Thompson, Town Engineer, accepted this as an appropriate remedy as it will provide a good opportunity for more relevant feedback. I should also note today, I spoke with Ned, and Little Sprouts LLC has agreed to put up a $15,000 bond to mitigate for the traffic study and to mitigate any outcomes that need to be addressed for further review.
Okay, thank you. And I think we will turn it over to Ned Corcoran for the applicant review. If we could unmute him.
April, if I may.
Yes.
Is it possible for Allison to pull up the site plan for this on the screen?
Yes, 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 please.
Thank you.
Do you want to see the site?
So,
Run
okay,
through
hold on.
Ned's PowerPoint.
However Ned wants to do it, I guess it's okay.
Okay.
We have two PowerPoints. They're brief, but we'd like to.
Okay, so let me pull up. Is this the first one, Ned?
That's the second one.
That's the second one. Bear with me. You had a lot of PowerPoints.
I know.
And for this is Allison's first time running the meeting, so you're
Nope,
doing.
that's not it. That's awesome. Is that it? No. Sorry, Ned. Doing the best I can here.
That's all right.
Is it the traffic?
No, the one you have up now is the traffic. The other one
Okay.
has a cover sheet that has the Little Sprouts logo on it.
Is this it?
No, that's the that was the site development plan that was presented. That's the full plan. That's not it.
Okay. All right.
Allison, what's next to that tab? You have another tab next to the one you have open. It says 919 Blue Hill Ave. Is that it?
Is this it?
No.
Oh, that's
The memo.
earlier version of the pickup and drop off procedures. We've amended that, and I can explain that in the process.
So it's not traffic, right?
Right.
Is this it?
That's it? No, that's
All right.
that was the last one we did. There's an updated one that's dated June 25. But
Okay. So
So maybe Ned, you can start talking while Allison keeps looking for the.
sure. So what we've done is we were asked specifically by the board after the June 11 presentation and hearing to respond to a set of questions and to meet with John Thompson and the representative of the Fire Station Building Committee. In that case, it was Dan Clark, who's the vice chair. And so we did that. And what I'd like to do is report back on what we've done, the modifications to the site plan were proposed in accordance with that. And then Giles Ham will present on the specific traffic mitigation measures that we've identified and shared with John and Dan and as well. So we were asked, the first question was asked to respond to was a question I think that came from Cheryl that asked whether we were required to install planting strips within the parking lot. We reviewed the bylaw. The bylaw provides that planting strips are required for parking areas that exceed 25,000 square feet, and particularly when you're separating areas that exceed 25,000 square feet. In this case, we have one parking area that's slightly less than 14,000 square feet. So in that case, we don't need to provide additional planting strips. We do have, I think, within the site plan, reasonable planting on each side between the central parking area and the parking area lot, the parking spaces that are in the front of the building, and also separation from the parking area and the entry to the site from Atherton Street. We were asked to meet with Mrs. Moody, who's the southerly abutter, and to speak with her specifically about a fence. I spoke with Tom Coulter, who's the former owner of this property. He arranged for me to meet with and to speak with her. She's requested a stockade fence that would replace the stockade fence that Tom installed for her and her husband some years ago. We've agreed to do that. The new site plan, most recent site plan, we did propose a white PVC vinyl fence on both the southerly and the westerly property lines. We have not spoken with the westerly abutters. We know that they are represented by Mr. Fee, and one effort to speak with them some months ago, they were not willing to discuss what might be reasonable, what we might do on the boundary line. But we are open to suggestion, either from the board or from them, as to whether the fence should match the stockade or what other fencing they might like. So we'll just leave that as an open. We also extended the fence on the plan further towards Atherton Street. The westerly fence earlier was probably 100. It came to about 100 feet south of Atherton Street. We've now extended it almost all the way to Atherton Street, and willing to extend it to the edge of the property at Atherton Street if that's appropriate. Lighting, we are asked to go back and double check cut sheets with respect to the dark sky compliance requirements. We provided 2 new cut sheets to modify the lighting within the parking area, and one of the lights provided on the sides of the buildings. They are now dark sky compliant, and one of them is motion sensitive, as requested by the board. We did meet with, we were asked also to look at fencing and planting around the dumpster and the transformer pad. We've beefed up the fencing and the planting there as part of the new site plan. And then lastly, we were asked, as I said, to meet with John Thompson and Dan Clark. We conducted a Zoom meeting with them earlier last week. John expressed particular concerns about traffic entering and exiting from Atherton Street, potential parking on Atherton Street as a, quote, more convenient place for people to park rather than to pull into the parking lot. We've got some slides that Giles has prepared to show how we would address that. We've got some pavement markings specific to limiting the notion of entering and exiting through the fire station, and as we have proposed and we confirmed both with Dan and John, we're prepared to submit a traffic and parking study 3 months after opening that would be subject to the scope of which would be subject to their review and approval, so that we would be studying the right issues from their concern. We also have a cut sheet that looks at the Versalock that would be proposed for the retaining wall along the Moody property, retaining some of the edge of that property. It's a couple of feet high. The retaining wall we're proposing is a Versalock with a stone face. It is interior to the property, inside the fence, visible only from the play area itself, and so we think it's an attractive look, but we think it's appropriate for this case. And with that, I'm prepared to hand it off to Giles for his presentation on the modifications to the traffic and parking mitigation that we've proposed.
Okay, if I can interrupt for 1 second. Allison, I just emailed you the series of presentations. I don't know if you can pull up your email. And the second one is the traffic.
Okay. I think I have the traffic one. I'm just trying to, this isn't nearly as easy as I had envisioned in my head.
Well, you're doing great. Don't
If,
but I do think we need to see
So
it.
is this the traffic? This is the traffic one, correct?
We still see your
see you.
off.
What are you seeing? All kinds of stuff you don't want to?
No,
Memo.
the parent drop-off memo.
So we're seeing the parent drop-off memo. The one modification that we did make, and we highlighted in red in the updated version that I forwarded, was that there would be no parking on Atherton Street. Atherton Street's actually more convenient than parking on within the parking lot because it's Atherton Street's the furthest distance from the front door. It's 170 feet plus. We require a U-turn on Atherton Street. We think it's a whole lot more convenient and appropriate for people to pull into the site, park in its parking space, and follow the procedures that we've outlined in the parking procedures that we required. We presented to the board for approval.
April, what was that? If Allison's having trouble, I think I have an opportunity to share screen also. If you want to send.
You're a co-host too, Cheryl, so you should be able to.
I just don't have the presentation. So if April, can I give you a different email to send it to? No, I don't want to broadcast it everywhere. Go ahead and send it.
Text me.
Yeah, I'll text it to you. You've got,
There it is.
that's the traffic one. Okay.
That may be it.
Okay, that's traffic. Let's go with it.
So,
Yeah.
good evening.
Is that your
Good e-
presentation, Giles?
Well, we'll find out if it's the right one in a minute. So,
Is this it?
looks
That's
good.
your name on the bottom. It says best.
That's it. Don't lose that. So,
Okay. Okay. I'm not touching anything. You just let me know when to move the
all right,
slide.
we'll stay with that one. Good evening, Giles Ham, managing partner at Vanessa & Associates. Let me just start by saying that I have over 35 years of experience in conducting traffic studies and conducted over 2,000 such studies. So my number one concern in approaching project is safety. That's the number one concern. And what we have prepared to you this evening is a safe plan for this project. So as Ned had alluded to, we had met with the town engineer and fire department to review their concerns. And we really had a very good meeting. We had a good exchange of ideas, and this plan is a result of that meeting. So on Bradley Road, you'll see fire station ahead sign, the yellow sign up on top of the plan. We have white edge lines on both sides of the fire station. We have no through traffic signs, 2 signs on each side of the fire station, as well as we have pavement markings for no through traffic at the fire station. So that really addresses their concerns in terms of cut through traffic. We've also added no parking signs along Atherton Street. And as a result of the older road safety audit study, we've added the no turn on red sign coming out of Bradley Road. So I think it was a very, very productive meeting. And we think this plan provides safety and the measures that the town was looking for. Next slide.
Can you scroll down, Allison?
Sure.
And just briefly, this slide really just shows you the distance from Atherton Street to the front door of the facility. So it's about 160 to 170 feet. We don't think people are going to park on Atherton Street to that distance. And again, we have the no parking signs that we've placed on the street as well. Next slide. At the last meeting, we were asked to review the safety and the sight distance for the Blue Hill Avenue driveway. So we did a couple things. We went out there and measured, we did several speed measurements of the southbound traffic and the speed of that traffic. Most of the traffic is traveling at 38 miles an hour or under. And that speed requires a certain sight distance for a safe design. So at 40 miles an hour, we need 305 feet of sight distance. We actually have 340 feet of sight distance. So it's a safe design as proposed. I would also just note that there's a kind of a retaining wall or a wall around the utility pole in front of the parcel land, and that wall will be removed, and that helps maintain good sight distances there.
Yeah, there are, just jump in, there are 4 telephone poles that are sort of run within the highway layout from Atherton Street south along the frontage. The second one to the south has about 1 foot to 1.5 foot high stone wall that was built around the telephone pole. Provides a little bit of impedance for sight distance. So we're recommending that we would remove that retaining wall.
And then just the last plan, and I'll be completed. Next plan. So we presented this plan to you before in terms of all the signage, but we've added on the Atherton Street exit driveway, we added a right turn only sign. We don't want people going left. We don't want people going through. So we've added that right turn only sign. So that's really kind of a summary of the concerns that we addressed. In my opinion, we've presented to you a very safe plan. We've worked with staff and we've incorporated those comments in developing this plan. Thank you.
Okay. I think, does the board have any questions after the presentations?
Excuse
Or do
me?
you have any questions for Ned or Giles right now?
No.
Cheryl?
No, I would request though that Allison, you did have plans. If you could just put the plans up now, that maybe the landscape plan, but just a plan. I think the landscape plan would be helpful.
All right, so
You had that, one of the documents you opened.
There
I'm
is,
sure I
earlier.
did.
the question is whether that was the full set, and I may not be the most.
Okay, okay.
That's the procedure, sorry. This isn't, I think what happened is when I was downloading these into the new computer, it may have duplicated from the Milton drive.
So if, I don't know if Ned, you have an updated plan you can email to Allison right now.
I can try.
Okay. So Denny, do you have any questions for the team, the applicant team right now? I mean, we can visit questions at the end too, but.
Yeah, I did have a question. I didn't see this in the documents that we were given, but has a economical explanation been given for why a smaller footprint is not feasible?
No. Nor will we give me one. Not,
Cheryl, is this helpful at all?
Yes, there was, there's a, let's see.
701, I think, is the
Yeah,
plan. It's towards the rear.
Towards the rear, okay.
so,
And I'm going to try and find. I will try and find at my other computer that was working not so well.
all these technology problems tonight. Right there, back one. There you go, landscape plan. Now, if you could zoom in a little bit, like on your plus sign up there.
All
There
right,
you
ready?
go. There you go.
Or even
Yep.
do a full screen.
Or full screen, right?
So that is the
Has that been revised, Ned?
that's been
since-
revised.
Okay.
What we've done is we've extended the planting and the fencing northward along the westerly butter line, almost to the curve. Doesn't quite come to the property line at Atherton Street. As I said, that's a short run, and we're prepared to do that as appropriate.
So I do have a question related to that. You asked that, you mentioned a fence. Is that the full length of the property line? North is to our right, is that correct?
Correct.
So the top would be the west,
Right.
and the left would be the south?
Right.
So the neighbor to the south requested stockade?
Yes.
And then right now you still show the vinyl, is that right?
Yeah.
Or you still propose the vinyl?
We were showing vinyl. The most recent plan showed vinyl. I've since had a conversation with Mrs. Moody. She's requested stockade. So that plan would have to be amended to show stockade, and that can be a condition certainly in the permit.
And you said that you haven't had a conversation with the neighbors to the west about what they might like for a fence on that.
At a site walk months ago, I proposed the notion that they, if they had a preference for the type of fencing that they might like to see, at the time they weren't willing to discuss anything along those lines. And I haven't had any follow-up specific discussion with them about fencing. So if Mr. Fee or they have ideas about what the fencing should look like, we're all ears.
And I didn't see, and maybe it's called out, but what is the planting that's called out along that border?
I think it's a line of arborvitaes
Mhm.
inside the fence, with other grass, lawn. There's lawn area.
Is that, so, sorry, Allison, do you mind scrolling back the opposite way? So
This way?
we can, yeah, that right
Yeah.
there. So we could see that. So in the middle there, sort of between that, the building and the property line, that long line of arborvitae, and then in the middle of that, or after that is grass? Is that what's proposed?
Yes, that's lawn. And then there's low shrubs. There is a schedule of plantings in the plan. I'm just going to go to it myself. But difficult to zoom in on.
Right.
But low shrubs along the sides of the building there, and then also on the easterly side of the building, a fence around the dumpster pad that would be on the right-hand side of the, looking at the easterly side, right-hand side of the one-way exit to 138 southbound, and then plantings around the electric transformer, which is located at the corner of the building.
Did you look into whether you could move that transformer over a little bit further away from the drive towards, I guess that would be the south?
We did. We're not sure it makes much of a difference. We'd like to stay as far away from budding properties as possible. And it's pretty straight run from there to there off of the existing telephone pole.
And is the engineer confident that the utility company doesn't need direct access to that transformer?
I don't know.
It's been my experience in my work that they require direct access. So something.
So I just got a text from the engineer who says yes, they would.
So the direct access here is off the driveway? Is he, if the engineer is signed in?
In terms of their vehicular access?
Right. The utility company, like if they want to come and service the transformer in any way, they're going to get to it from the driveway?
Get to it off the driveway?
I guess my point is I wouldn't want it to come in off of Blue Hill Avenue.
No, they would have to come into the site and then come up park along the edge of the driveway and access from there. They wouldn't turn in from Blue Hill Avenue. They'd come through the site.
I guess I'd be interested to see what the westerly neighbors think about that boundary, because a long line of fence and a long line of arborvitae is, very monotonous, if you will, along that entire length. So whether the preference, whether they have any other ideas about what they might like to see there, I'd be interested in hearing.
I think that Mr. Fee is representing the abutter, so hopefully he can speak to that.
Okay.
Cheryl, I just emailed you the slides. We got them from Bill, not from Allison.
Okay, I was looking for them earlier and I couldn't find it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, April.
So, Jenny, I'm sorry, go ahead. Did you have more questions?
Yeah, so I asked Ned Corcoran if he had provided information on the economical feasibility of a smaller footprint, and he asked me why I asked. I wanted to ask Ned Corcoran if he received the letter dated June 19th from Pierce and Mandel.
Yes.
For that? Okay, so they asked for it, so that's why I asked for it, and so you didn't provide it.
We're not going to provide it. It's not relevant to whether or not we're entitled to site plan approval, and so we won't be providing it. We're going forward with this project. We're entitled to relief for this project.
All right, well, they outlined a variety of issues with the intersection of Atherton and Bradley. I mean, I can read it into the record. MassDOT and MPO, the town of Milton collected data. And the intersection of Atherton and Bradley Road has the second worst crash rating, defined as a high crash location by MassDOT. The designation of high crash location is given to those areas that rank in the top 5% of crashes. The 2015 RSA concluded that Atherton Bradley's intersection crash rate was higher than state and district averages due to its geometry, poor signage, and lack of left turn lane. Corridor study suggested a series of short-term, long-term solutions to alleviate congestion, reduce crashes at this intersection, including upgraded signals, optimized timing, additional signals, and signs for emergency vehicles leaving, entering the fire station, street lights, and separated bicycle pedestrian lanes. So,
All of which are identified in a long-term corridor study being performed by MassDOT and subject to funding for substantial transportation improvements in the corridor, which, you know, maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now. All I know is I have the only traffic engineer in the room who has testified based on his experience that this is a safe plan. He's reviewed the traffic material that was provided from MassDOT. The corridor study that was performed is more recent than the study that's being relied on by Mr. Fee, and we've determined that it's safe.
okay, well, I've got materials in front of me that say that this intersection is not safe. It describes an annual damages of $300,000 a year. And we've been told by the neighbors of a death in the last couple of years there. I mean, so I'm getting conflicting information. So in a situation like this, we would often ask for an independent peer review.
So Denny, I would ordinarily agree with you, except that our town engineer has said he's comfortable with the design and the modifications, and his original concerns about safety have been alleviated. So, I mean, if there was a disagreement between the town and the applicant, then I would say without question, we need a third-party review. But now we have the town engineer who is intimately familiar with the intersection and the applicant's engineer in agreement with traffic mitigation to make this safe. So I don't know that it would be prudent to pursue a third-party review when we already have our representative saying that it's safe. But let's leave that for deliberation. I mean, I think we can get into this more with the rest of the board as well, who may have other opinions about it. But if you have other questions for Ned or Giles on their presentation, and then we can go to Mr. Fee, who can outline for us his concerns as well.
Okay, I did have a question. The pictures of the daycare show a very flat topography. So I was wondering if the plan was to regrade the whole set, you know, the whole site to that extent.
Yes.
And so,
There's going to be a significant regrading, particularly with as the property slopes from Blue Hill Avenue down into the main level of the parking area.
okay. So would you be able to keep the 24-foot tree?
Which tree?
There was a tree mentioned in a letter that was sent to all of us, and I'm having trouble getting my hands on it. Oh, here it is. I don't know where exactly it is on the site, but there was one of the neighbors noted a tree.
Do you want to pull up the landscape plan, Allison, and maybe Ned can show us what is being preserved, if there's any trees?
While she does that, I was also wondering about those.
No, I think there's a fairly large tree. It's roughly in the area where the dumpster pad is going, so we will not be saving that tree.
Are you saving any trees on site, Ned, that are in existence today?
That's the only significant tree. We're not going to be saving that.
Will there be any addition along the, you know, where the standing lane enters the site? Will that just be, I noticed it said wood chips, is that it? And pavers going right up to the abutter line? you know, I know there's a line of arborvitae's, but it stops.
Yeah, that's proposed to be a lawn, grass lawn, between the entry drive and the abutter's property.
So there's no buffer for the exhaust? There's no landscape buffer there for the exhaust?
Well, there's grass. There are, on their property, there are 4 or 5 very significant trees. Beautiful, tall, healthy.
That's fine, but that's not your site, so it doesn't.
No, so what we said, if they think if you or they think we should extend the fence line up along the property to mitigate that, we're happy to do it.
And can you extend the arborvitae's too?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to hear from the abutters, but I think extending the arborvitae's is an idea if they're interested in it, or I'm interested to hear from them. I think I can save my questions till after we hear from the citizens, any citizens interested in speaking.
Okay, and Rich, do you have any questions for us?
Well, I'm being told quickly that there are some trees towards Atherton Street that will be saved.
No, I don't have anything additionally for right now. This is
Okay. Thank you. So what I would suggest we do is we received a pretty lengthy letter from Mr. Fee, Michael Fee, who I see is here, and is representing a number of folks in the neighborhood. So I would suggest we move to him next. And you are now unmuted, Mr. Fee, if you would like to explain your comment letter and share your thoughts.
Sure. Thank you very much. And before I start, I just wanted to make note of the fact that one of my clients, Ore Odibijet, would like to speak at some point during the hearing. So maybe after I'm done, you can go to her. She is the abutter to the immediate west and could answer some questions that came up earlier in the proceeding. Thank you to Member Swenson for reading my memo, and I appreciate the attention to detail that the board has brought to this very complicated site plan review. If you read the letter, I think we expressed in detail the serious concerns that my clients have regarding the ability of this site to safely accommodate the magnitude of the proposed use. We contend that what the applicant is proposing to do, both in terms of parking design and the amount of traffic that it is depositing onto adjacent streets, simply cannot be accomplished safely on the limited site that they have. Our letter outlined our specific critique, not only of the TEM report, in which they generated traffic counts that I think are, as we explained, inherently unreliable, but also we criticized the traffic engineer's failure to address some of the issues that Member Swenson brought up, that there's a very serious Route 138 corridor study that says this is a dangerous intersection. And the traffic analysis that was presented doesn't deal with any of that. I would respectfully suggest to the board that as the town permitting body that is responsible for public safety in matters of this type, that if there is any doubt whatsoever in your mind as to whether or not this use can be accomplished safely on this property, you should take a step back and make sure that this is appropriate. There will be litigation one way or another after what you decide. And so I think that it's important for you to err on the side of public safety, because that, I think, in essence, is your function. As I note in the letter, all of our concerns could be mitigated by a reduction in the size of the magnitude of this, this proposed use. And I was flabbergasted, frankly, by Ned's response to Member Swenson when she asked whether or not there had been any discussion regarding the ability of the applicant to perhaps adapt this use so that it is less intense in terms of the number of people moving through it, and perhaps a little bit more attentive to the needs of the neighborhood. And what he said was, we're entitled to relief. Well, that's not right. That's wrong. They are not entitled to relief. This is a site plan review that is required under your bylaw. And simply because it's a protected use under Dover does not mean that you give it some kind of site plan light treatment. You give it as much robust review as you feel is necessary and appropriate. And if in your mind you decide that there's questions about whether or not the size of this project is too big, then you should ask them to present to you why it would become uneconomical if they were to have be required as a condition to have a smaller building with a fewer number of people. Now, I understand Member Tugias's statement about the fact that traffic has been signed off by the town engineer. I haven't seen a memorandum from the town engineer. I don't know if the town engineer drafted a memorandum. I don't know what information was presented to the town engineer. And frankly, I don't know if he's familiar with the 138 study. All I'm hearing is what the applicant's attorney is presenting to the board about what the town engineer said. So I think it's incumbent upon the board to make certain that if all we're hearing is sort of anecdotal response from town staff about the project, I think it's your function and your responsibility to take it seriously and make sure that all of the questions that are raised in my letter and that Member Swenson is raising are addressed substantially. That's all I've got. And I'm happy to answer questions, but I would really like you to hear from Ore, who is the abutter to the immediate west. Thank you.
I just wanted to thank Mr. Fee for responding to my questions at the last meeting and for providing me with all of this and providing all of us with all of this information. I thought it was very helpful and I very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So before we move on, I just want to answer two questions. Well, the first one is really a question for the applicant, the abutter, the attorney to the abutter, and now Jenny Swenson, a member, has, if you plan to propose a smaller building, I'd like to hear, the answer is no. Is that your?
Yes, no, we meet all of the zoning requirements.
That's fine. Second, I just wanted to make sure that was clear, that there's no intention. I mean, there's no requirement for you to do so, but it has been requested, so we should all know what the answer is. The second is Allison Quinn is our assistant town planner. She actually participated in a conference between the applicant and the town engineer. And I don't know, Allison, if you want to summarize what your understanding of the conversation was and what the follow-up was from the town engineer with you.
I'd be happy to. Issues that were raised regarding the exit on Atherton Street and its relation to the fire station across the street were brought up by Dan Clark. He is a member of the Fire Station Design Committee and the town's traffic engineer, John Thompson. At that time, Ned had said he would take those concerns back to the team. And from that, we got feedback, both email and by over the phone, that the proposed remedies, including stop signs, some signage, and potential, and a new traffic/parking study that would be, the scope of that study would be designed both the engineer for the town and Dan Clark, after they have been operating for 3 months, would suffice. And that's, verbatim, as much as I can give you the conversation is, I don't know if I would qualify it as anecdotal. I was present. So I totally, appreciate you have a different, I'm just trying to give you information as it was given to me.
That's fine, Allison. I just wanted the public to understand that it wasn't just that we were hearing this from Ned, that town staff to the planning board.
Right. They were both comfortable with what was proposed to them. And that's all that's it.
And I just saw Mr. Fee raise his hand. I think he has a follow-up, so let's go back to him briefly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I don't want to take up too much of your time. I think 9 times out of 10 in a project of this size and that's this controversial, that kind of analysis has to be in writing. And the fact that there was a meeting between the applicant and the town engineer is great. And the fact that it has been relayed by hearsay from a town staff, Yeah, I understand that the desire to rely on that, but I think what's been presented to you is not only the Route 138 corridor study, but some serious criticism regarding the traffic counts. I don't know if the town engineer was aware of any of that. And I think that when we get further along in the process, if the board is going to make a decision that grants site plan review approval to this project, then it should have something in writing that it's relying on from its town engineer that the traffic is safe. That's my suggestion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the abutter as Mr. Fee suggested.
Actually, I had a quick question.
Yes.
I was wondering, Mr. Fee, if you had seen the traffic study done by Vanessa that Ned had submitted to us?
I unmuted you, Mr.
Sure, it was part of last week's, I'm sorry, the last meeting's presentation. I did see that.
Okay, just wanted to know. Thank you.
I did, thank you.
And I just want to note that we do have feedback from our town engineer in writing that says he is satisfied with adjustments to the latest plan. Let's move on to Butter. And I don't know how to pronounce your name, but I've unmuted you. Maybe you can introduce yourself with your name and please.
Okay, thank you very much. So my name is Uriode Judy and I'm the West Abutter. So I wanted to just reiterate that while I'm not against building an educational facility, I'm very, very concerned about the safety of the scale of the building that is being proposed, both as an abutter and also as a physician. As a physician, the first tenet that we live by is first, do no harm. And I feel that a building of this scale, 10,000 square foot with 26 staff, 124 students at an intersection that is already designated as a high crash location in the top 5% of crashes is highly problematic. And I think it's going to do harm. So we've already heard about sort of the road study where this is rated the second highest crash site out of 10 intersections. Before the influx of the type of traffic this project of this scale will bring into this neighborhood. So I feel that this proposal with this sort of scale, the issues around this intersection will only be compounded. So from my view, I feel that considering a scaled version that will promote safety for both the neighborhood as well as the students and the staff of this family should be a priority that should be considered. And I also wanted to sort of address what Mr. Cochran said about we not engaging in a discussion about fencing. That was several months ago. I'm sorry, I'm a physician taking care of patients. So if I've not had time to like talk about a fence when we're talking about safety, I feel that that is sort of, I don't appreciate you sort of making the, making it seem like we're not willing to engage in a conversation. Yes, we will engage in a conversation about fencing, but I feel that safety is paramount and should be addressed. And then we can also talk about fencing, but I feel that we can't skirt the issue of safety of a project this size, which I think can be mitigated by a scaled down version of the project. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time to participate. If I may ask you a question. So we've heard from the applicant that they have no intention of proposing a reduced scale project. So of course that is at their own risk. That doesn't guarantee that they'll be approved or disapproved. But you know, with that, I think it would be helpful if the project is approved to know what your preferences are as far as screening or fencing, or if you've had a chance to think about that.
So thank you for bringing that up. We would have to think about that. I know that we would not want a vinyl fencing for the westerly side. I think at minimum we would want a stockade fence. And I also would want arborvitaes, because having a fence all the way to the very end, I feel is completely monotonous. So obviously I would need to think more about that, but definitely not vinyl fencing. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board?
No, I just wanted to thank you. Thank you for coming in tonight.
Yes. Okay, so this is where it gets tricky because we don't know who else is here. So if you are on camera and you want to raise your hand, please do. If we have the ability to unmute everyone and see if there's anyone else who would like to speak, that would be great.
So Allison, April, a couple of hands went up.
Okay.
Giles Ham and someone identified as Kevin, right? I think I saw.
Okay.
On the
Kevin.
video, that's on the video.
Yes, okay. You are unmuted if you want to unmute yourself. Kevin is up. If you could please introduce yourself and give us your name and address.
Yes, my name's Kevin Brady. I live in Franklin Lakes, New Jersey, and I'm part of the development team here. And I simply was just trying to get the attention of the board for Giles to respond to some of the traffic concerns that have been raised, because I do think it's important to make sure that our traffic engineer has weighed in on some of the concerns that have been reiterated, if you don't mind. So thank you.
Thank you. Hope it's nice in New Jersey this time of year.
April,
Yes.
I was going to also ask Giles if he could respond to, we understand that the intersection is dangerous, but there's also improvements that are planned, and his professional opinion about what those improvements will do to the safety of the intersection once they're implemented.
Yep.
Thank you.
Giles, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, good evening, Giles Ham. So just a couple points that were made. The traffic projections that have been presented are accurate, and they're actually based on actual counts. And in the original study, you have backup information that supports that. So let's just make it very clear. The projections are accurate, and I've reviewed them. Keep in mind that while you have 124 students maximum, staff and students do not all come at once. They're just naturally staggered over time. So there is no real large peak of traffic. So that's number one. Another point that's interesting, up to 30% of these children arrive with a sibling. So a third of the time, roughly a third of the time, you're gonna have two kids in a car. And that really helps to reduce the traffic. And that's common with really a lot of these facilities. We see that at a lot of facilities. In terms of the safety studies, and I've looked at them all. That's one of the first things I did. The 2015 road safety audit is just old. It's based upon traffic accident data from 2010. It's not reliable, it's old, and it doesn't tell the picture. And the latest information is provided in the MPO study. The road safety audit looked at 3 years of data. Now we look at 5 years of data. The corridor study looked at 5 years of data. I presented that data to you at the last meeting. Contrary to what's in the attorney's letter, there's not 28 accidents at that intersection. That's just factually incorrect. The data that I presented you is from the MPO study. It's 17 accidents over 5 years. I presented that to you. 10 of those accidents are rear end accidents. We expect those accidents at a signalized location. As traffic engineers, and keep in mind, I'm a professional registered engineer in the state of Massachusetts, we look at an accident rate. So we take the accident data, we look at the volume of traffic, and we calculate an accident rate. Based upon the latest 5 years of data, the accident rate at this intersection is 10% below the average accident rate at a signalized location. That tells me, as an expert, it's safe. And I've been out there several times. I've observed conditions, and it's safe. The data tells us it's safe. That's the data, 17 accidents in 5 years. In terms of the corridor study, they really focused in on a lot of issues in terms of pedestrians and bicycle lanes. So they looked at alternatives with a multi-use path or a bicycle lane. They looked at bicycle lanes on each side of the road. So those are kind of the alternatives that they're looking at. Kind of long-term alternatives is what they've looked at. Again, we've incorporated some of the signage that was proposed and discussed as part of the prior studies, which is the fire station sign as well as the no turn on red sign. Again, we've met with town experts and staff, and we've come up with a plan that they agree is safe, and we think it's a safe plan. I think that's really what I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would ask anybody, can we unmute everyone at once?
Yeah, we can do that.
Thank you, Mike.
very seriously because I have a political affiliation. No, Kristen's
Oh, there's
not.
that.
I mean, no,
Um,
she's not.
Anyone that would like
Ellen,
to speak, please do so on this item. There's quite a few people on the line. Anybody that's muted at this point is muted at their own discretion. So if you would like to speak, this is your chance to do so for the public hearing on 919 Blue Hill Avenue. Can the rest of the board just scan through and see if you're seeing anyone? I don't see anyone and I don't hear anyone.
I don't either.
Anybody else? No. Okay, then we can remute everybody but the board. And I have a question for Ned, if I may, and the rest of the board, please prepare your own questions. But at what point do you consider your child care center to be at full capacity? Because we're talking about revisiting traffic and parking in 3 months. And I don't know if 3 months gives them enough time to reach the type of occupancy where there would be peak impact. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little more about that.
I think the expectation is that, they'll start, assuming we get approval, as soon as we can go, they'll start construction. The construction process will be about a year. Concurrently with the start of construction, they'll be marketing and trying to, get the site occupied as soon as it's ready to open. The recommendation that we made was 3 months because I think Giles's experience on other relevant projects is that 3 months is a pretty good measure at that point of where occupancy will be. If the board thinks that 4 or 5 or maybe 6 months it might provide a more accurate depiction, we can look at that. We're sort of flexible on when the study would be performed. And then obviously we'd commit to honoring the obligations or any of the mitigation that would come out of that study if there was additional requirements.
So Giles, have you done these types of studies, follow-on studies for childcare centers such as this previous and prior?
I'm not sure if we've done childcare centers, but monitoring studies is very common. And I would only suggest that when we do a monitoring study here, we would count the peak hours, we would count the parking lot. Part of what we'll report back to the town is the number of students that were there on those given days and the number of staff. So we can, so if it's 99 students, we can look at that, but we reported, demand per student. So we can project out to a full occupancy. And I think as Ned alluded to, 3, 4, 5, or 6 months, we're comfortable with either way. But the bottom line is we want to be able to document and show you and show the town what's happening out there. And because we're confident in what we do.
So April, I just did get a text from another member of the team suggesting that 6 months may be a more appropriate time relative to what they would expect to be a peak.
Okay, any members of the board have any follow-on questions for the team?
No, I do not.
Rich?
I do have one last question. So the corridor study says that intersection needs upgraded signals, optimized timing, additional signals and signs for emergency vehicles leaving, entering the fire station, street lights, and separated bicycle pedestrian lanes. So those things are what the corridor study suggests. And we're talking about setting aside $15,000. Is the idea that $15,000 would go to any one of those things, or because Ned even acknowledged that the Route 138 corridor project may not happen for 10 years, maybe never. So I don't know that we can count on the corridor, the Route 138 corridor study to address these issues.
We're not proposing any modifications to the state highway. It's their jurisdiction, not the town's jurisdiction. we have, I think Giles has been pretty clear that this is a safe intersection. We've identified some improvements, traffic measures that we're prepared to follow. The state has its own process. It's their highway. And so they'll do what they do.
I just have concern adding 124 children and 26 staff. And by their calculations, it's 548. I understand Giles would have that significantly. So that brings me back to that question that I asked at the beginning, which is the economic feasibility. And the other question I have for Mr. Fee is, how many students would you propose could work in a safe manner? Have you thought of that?
I'm sorry, Jenny, who's that question for?
Mr. Fee, the attorney that brought these issues.
Okay, I mean, I'm happy to let him answer and we can do that, but I just want to make sure that, I mean, it doesn't necessarily relate only because Ned and the applicant have said they're not going to make any adjustments. So, I mean, we can get Mr. Fee's feedback, but if the applicant is refusing to amend their plan, that's...
I'm just asking for the economical explanation, that's all. And so the economical explanation...
I totally understand what you're asking for and I understand why. I'm just saying that if Ned is refusing or the applicant doesn't put it forward, it can't be part of our, I mean, I guess it can be part of our discussion, but it's not the application before us. But let's unmute Mr. Fee and see if he has some comment on what scale or size of project he thinks the abutters would be happy with.
And thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me this information.
Of course. Mr. Fee, you should be unmuted.
Thank you. In the letter of June 19th and previously to discussions with Ned, we proposed a building of half the size with half the number of students and half the number of staff. And respectfully, Madam Chair, what I would suggest is that if the applicant is unwilling to explore that option, then the options available to the board are to deny the application because they're refusing to provide information, or unilaterally apply a condition that limits the scope and size of the building and the number of students and staff who can use it.
Yes, thank you. I understand our discretion here.
April, there is another option here, and there is something I just wanted to bring up. We looked at previously, or we had presented to us previously, that there are staggered pickup and drop off so that the use is spread out over a period of time and not all at one time, particularly not at peak hours necessarily. And my understanding is that we can make that a condition of an approval if we so elect to. And that could mandate that the impacts are spread out over time.
Yeah, so what I think we should do, Cheryl, is see if there's anyone else, one last chance, see if anybody else wants to speak, and then close the public hearing and we can talk as a board about how we feel about moving forward and what potential conditions would be. Is that okay with you?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Last chance here for speakers.
I would like just a very brief comment.
Yeah.
This is a Dover Amendment application. Strictly speaking, the board is limited to reviewing whether or not the project fits the zoning. Period. End of sentence. I've laid out in my memo early on that you cannot use site plan approval process to deny of use that's otherwise fits the zoning.
Okay, Ned, I'm going to interrupt you. I think that the board needs to talk about what our role is. We know we can talk about that. I don't think it's adding a whole lot of value for you to tell us or for Mr. Fee to tell us what we're here to do. I would like to hear from the public. Let's unmute everybody one more time and see if there's anyone else that would like to speak. I want to make sure before we close this public hearing, if there's anyone on the phone or on the screen that wants to speak, that you get an opportunity. So if all of the board can please scroll around and look for waivers, and if we could please unmute everybody one more time. And I'm sorry, Mike, but I just want to be extra careful about this before we close the public hearing. Everyone
I'm not seeing
unmuted?
anybody.
I'm
I
not
don't
seeing,
see anyone.
I'm not seeing anyone and I'm not hearing anyone. So I think we are good to close the public hearing.
April, may I just ask a question about relative to that?
Yes.
I would like opportunity for the westerly abutter to weigh in on the fencing and the landscaping along that. And I do think we may need to think about keeping it open in order to have a revised site plan that incorporates their desires there.
Well, I asked that question and what I thought the answer was a preference, and certainly the arborvitae's was a preference, the extension of the arborvitae's, but let's ask
A
the.
stockade fence.
Yeah, that's what I heard too, but I will unmute the westerly abutters and ask them to please weigh in if we misheard that.
Yeah, I understood that they wanted a little time to think about it, but I could have misheard.
No, you understood correctly. We won't have time to think about it. What we said that we knew for sure is that we didn't want a vinyl fence. We would want a stockade fence. We would want arborvitae's, but I need to review closely, but definitely not a vinyl, stockade, and arborvitae's.
And preferably that stretches almost all the way to Atherton.
All the way to Atherton, yes, that's what I.
So arborvitae's and stockade fence all the way to Atherton.
I guess, as tall as possible, because there's a great difference between our lot and the other lot. So we're lower. So if the fence is on our side, it's going to be very tiny. But if it's on that side, it's going to be adequate, I think.
So a 6-foot fence, do you think would do the trick?
As high as possible.
We'll probably need time to sort of think about the specifics, just because this was brought up here. It's sort of like
just going
coming up with ideas on the spot, but so sort of a general sense, and would need a little bit more time to sort of go through the details together.
So I understand. I just think that I was hoping that we could close the public hearing tonight because we have had this open for quite some time.
I don't think we can keep the public hearing open for something like an ongoing discussion with the neighbors about the arborvitae and how long it should stretch and the fence. I think we could put a condition in the site plan approval if we wanted to vote an approval that would say that, we would come in, we would sort of say what we think they want now, and they could come back for a modification if there's some other situation that happens after they, proceed with the project, if we vote for the permit.
Well, that's what I was thinking too. If there was a potential for a condition, it would have to be stockade fence and arborvitae's all the way stretching to Atherton, unless the abutters requested something else.
Right.
Or some other preferred material as agreed to the abutters.
That's what I would suggest.
I'm gonna throw something out because we did a site plan approval for the Bent's building on Randolph Avenue. And we had our, what was submitted for the fence and the landscaping, and our decision there was much like we're talking about. But once it was installed, there were disagreements between the neighbor and the Bent's property owners. And it involved, I ended up as chair of the planning board getting involved in that. Bill Clark as planning director, Joe Prondak, involved select board members. And it took quite a bit of back and forth to come to a resolution that was satisfactory to both parties. So the extent that we can have clarity, in the most clarity in the plan and in the decision, I think is actually going to be better for all parties.
Okay. So, I mean, but the point, I guess, of order is, do we just parties to negotiate? I mean, on every permit, we're going to allow 2 people to negotiate indefinitely?
No.
I completely understand what the abutters are saying. Hearing has been open since February 13th, and there's been plans presented, and I would love to put in something that seems like their preference, and give them the room to change their mind and address it. And if we need to make a modification, I think the board would be very much inclined to do so. And if we can write a condition where it doesn't actually require the planning board process, where the applicant can meet the needs of the neighbor, that seems ideal.
I agree.
So if we're being specific about the arborvitae, Thuja green giant grows fast, tall, and wide. So it's a really great buffer. And it's deer resistant.
Thank you.
And it's a great thing for sound and exhaust absorption. I think that with the fence would be a good idea. I mean, it can grow up to 3 feet a year. So even if they put in like a 3-foot one now, you'd be in good shape.
So we can discuss those suggestions to Denny and.
Oh, I'm sorry. We need to.
So
close-
what we have before us is that we need a motion to close the public hearing.
Yes.
I would like to make a motion to close the public hearing. Application for site plan approval for 919 Blue Hill Ave.
Does anyone want to second the motion?
I'll second the motion.
We have to do a roll call.
Rich is muted, and I can't get to him on my screen.
So I unmuted him. He's sometimes.
Okay.
No,
There he is.
it's allowing me now, but it hasn't been allowing me.
Oh boy.
You want to close the meeting? Is he good?
Yeah, I'm good. I have to put it on mute. I've got my young son running around behind me, so.
Completely understand that. Okay, so let's do a roll call vote. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Probably already had the discussion on this. Any further? No? Okay, then we'll do a roll call vote. Kathleen O'Donnell,
In favor, yes.
Cheryl Tagayas,
Yes.
Rich Beeler,
Yes.
Denny Swenson.
Yes, I'm in favor of closing the public hearing. Right?
We weren't tricking you into something else.
And yes.
I don't want to wake up and they're like, what are you
I know.
Okay, so thank you all for participating, all of the members of the public, and to the applicants for your feedback and presentation. And now we should have a discussion about how to proceed. Who would like to go first?
I could go if you want.
Yes, please.
So I've looked at Pearson Mandel's letter. Thank you, Mr. Fee, for sending that along. And I also looked at town council's letter to us describing the limitations or not on the planning board. I also did my own research on cases revolving around the Dover Amendment. And I read probably 10 or 12 different cases about this Dover Amendment and the issue about site plan approval and what we can look at. And I took a look to see that, we're allowed to sort of take a look at, the zoning regulations regarding open space, dimensions, the bulk of the building, the parking and the structures and all that sort of thing for an educational use. That's totally permitted on our part. And we've done that. I think it's sad that we couldn't get the original design, which I thought was much more attractive than what they can do by right. I'm sad to see that because of the fact that they wouldn't be able to get the relief from the zoning board, that we don't get something that I think looked better and used the site better. But, they're entitled to sort of give that up and go for what they can build as of right. So, I think they've probably done the best they could given those circumstances. But going to the question of the financial viability of a smaller project, I don't think legally that's something that we can look at. We don't do that for other kinds of site plan approvals. When somebody's coming in for site plan approval, do we say, oh, can you give us a pro forma? We can't even do that for 40B projects. So I don't see how you can have a financial qualification on this project when you can't have it on other ones that are not Dover Amendment. And so I think that, you know, that we can put conditions in this. I think that really the big issue is the traffic and dealing with the exits and entrances. And I think I mean, I was amused a bit by the fact that the suggestion was to get a peer review for traffic, when in fact Van Ness is who we use for peer review on other projects in this town. So, you know, I think that, you know, we have, I think, addressed as best we can the traffic situation. No one knows what traffic's going to be. We don't, you know, 6 months ago, traffic was a lot different than it was 3 months ago. And now 3 months future might be totally different. So I do think that we've looked at the issues that we are entitled to look at. And I think that, I said, looking at the financial viability of a smaller project is something completely beyond this, what we're allowed to do under law.
Kathleen, you actually reminded me that I should have reviewed what our role is, because we have two different sides trying to tell us what that is. But our own lawyer, our town council, has explained it to us. And as you stated with the Dover Amendment, we cannot change the use because this is a protected use. However, we can, as a board, during our deliberations on site plan approval, look at reasonable regulations that would otherwise apply to site plan approval projects that are not Dover Amendment uses. And those provisions in our bylaw for site plan approval are protection of adjoining premises, convenience and safety of vehicular and pedestrian movements within the site and in relation to adjoining streets, adequacy of disposal of sewage, refuse, and other wastes, and adequacy of drainage for surface water, adequacy of space for loading and deliveries, unit density and proximity of adjacent buildings, and adequacy of lighting. So as you mentioned, Kathleen, I believe that all of these things were discussed. There may be a difference of opinion on some of them, but I do think that we have certainly considered all of the regulations that are not only reasonable, but are otherwise required of site plan approval and certainly would apply to this. So with that, Danny, Rich, Cheryl, would any of you?
Yes. April. One of the things that I think is particularly important in the list that you read from was the convenience and safety of vehicular and pedestrian movement within the site. And this is something that I think we've looked at and asked questions about and have been given quite a bit of information about. I just would like to point out that this parcel, the fact that it's located at an intersection that's busy doesn't mean that people who own the parcel cannot have access to their property for illegal use. It's just like the fire station is at a busy intersection. We're not telling the fire station building committee that they shouldn't locate a new fire station there. So managing the impacts, I think, is the best that we can do. And I think what's been proposed is addresses a lot of the safety concerns. And I would just like to say, like I said before, that I would like to impose conditions that stagger the pickup and drop off, because that was presented to us as the way the facility would be operated. And so I think we should be within our rights to put that in the conditions of the site plan approval. And then I would like us to go to the 6-month analysis rather than the 3. And it's also been presented to us that off-site parking at the park and ride down the street would be an option. So I'd like to have that be something that's evaluated at that 6-month time frame, and impose a condition that if there are parking or overflow problems on the site, that be mandated, that staff or others have to use an off-site location. And then thirdly, I'd like to have some kind of condition which allows for further discussion with the westerly abutter about what the fence and landscape are going to be. And maybe that's something that that Joe Prondak, when the building permit is reviewed on that application, that something has been submitted to the planning department that says that the parties have met and come to an agreement on that landscaping My preference would have been to see that submitted and part of the record. But I do think it's really important. It's a long boundary, and it's an aesthetic that the abutter is going to be living with for the long run. And I think it's important that they have more input on what that's going to look like.
Any?
Yes, I agree that there should be conditions to stagger pickup and drop off. I agree we should put the condition about the arborvitae and stockade, 6-foot stockade fence all the way to Atherton. I also want to explain that I am not or never have suggested that the applicant not do this use or guide them toward any other use. I did my homework as well, and 2 lawyers are telling me that it's perfectly appropriate to ask the question of the economic feasibility because it was brought up, and it's perfectly appropriate to ask that question. So I guess I disagree with others, but that's where I'm coming from.
So just on that point, Denny, I agree with you. It's perfectly appropriate for you to ask any question you want.
Thank you.
I chose not to answer it, so that's their discretion as well. But I don't want you to think it in any way that any of my comments earlier were meaning that you were in any way out of line, because you're absolutely not, as you never are.
Well, thank you. I wish that I got the same apology from Mr. Corcoran, because he's someone who does a lot of business with him, and I've always been kind and respectful to him, and I felt rather disrespected. So thank you.
Hopefully he will follow up with you and you guys can take care of that.
That would be a good idea.
Yeah. Okay. Is that it?
No.
No, I meant for Denny.
Oh.
I wasn't
All right.
No, I would never do that. Denny,
Right.
did you have anything else?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Rich, please.
Yeah, sure. No. So I got a few things. I've saved my comments to the end. I didn't want to jump in. But so just a question first. I remember after we had town council give us kind of the rule, like what our rules are here. I thought I had asked if these could be posted online. Were they? Because I was looking around, I couldn't. I'll be honest with you, I couldn't even find this stuff online. So it might be there. So I just was curious.
The Dover Amendment rules?
The ones that Kevin Freitag had given us as when we asked the question, could you tell us kind of what because there was a lot of throughout this process, there's been a lot of folks saying what our rules are and what we can and can't do. And if you recall, we asked Kevin Freitag to weigh in. He did. He wrote up a very lengthy thing that Cheryl thankfully read. And my question is, was that ever posted to where we are keeping all these documents for the folks to see?
I don't know. I mean, I think what was, I know it's on the, Allison sent it and posted it in the planning board files.
No, that wasn't, no, yeah, no, my question was just, I recall afterwards, I asked if we could post, but it's neither here nor there. I was just curious because.
I would say though, Rich, that I'm a little scared about our rules and regulations on what we can do.
It's not, well, regardless, I mean, it's public information if he gives it to us, so it shouldn't scare us at all. I mean, if somebody sends it to me on email, it is public and I have to save it. So anyway, it was just a question. I was curious just because that took up a lot of tonight, and we could have just pointed to it. The other thing is, I mean, I'm going through some things that were already kind of said by everybody, but I agree. I mean, when we talk about conditions, I like all the ones that were talked about. The only thing that I'm a little uneasy about is I love is a strong word. I like the fact that folks came together and made a kind of a plan that says, hey, we're going to take some money, put it aside to do a study, to do something. So that to me, I'm not even thinking about that or care at all about it unless it's something more like laid out, like this is what we're looking for. I thought that the Giles, I think it was, kind of outlined things that he wanted to do. I thank him for that because quite honestly, just to say we're going to do a study does nothing for me. And so for me, I'd like And I'll be honest with you, this is going to be my sticking point for me to like vote on this right now. I really want to see that kind of laid out. What are we looking at? Like, how would that money be used? When's it, how can we, like, when is it a no, I'm not going to do it, or yes, you have to do it? I mean, that sounds like a disaster waiting to happen, just to say, hey, we're going to think about doing some stuff and we're going to get together. I love that Dan Clark stepped forward, and it sounded like the fire station stepped forward to look at it. But again, I think we need some more teeth in that. I do, this is just more of a comment. I agree. You know, somebody, I don't know if it was Kathleen, if you or Cheryl, might have been whoever, said that, you know, times have changed, right? So, you know, what 6 months ago looked like in that traffic and what next 6 months from now looks like is, you know, who knows what it's gonna be like, right? And so all I know is God only knows how many people or how long it's gonna take for the masses to take public transportation again. The masses don't take public transportation, there's gonna be a whole lot more cars, in my opinion, on that road. And, you know, I'm not a traffic engineer. I live here though, and I know that's a tough road. And, you know, just my feeling is, you know, people are in that neighborhood are gonna feel it. I actually do like this as of right a little better than the last, to be honest with you. I do think it's better off the main road, the entrance and exit, but I do think we've got to be very aware and listen to the neighbors and to the fire station. And I think people for the most part are doing that. So I would definitely say there should be something in there that says we listen to or loop back with those neighbors to make sure that we add some, or we make the buffer that much better. I like that the last comment somebody made about park and ride, and Cheryl, that might have been you, about, hey, maybe we should build in there something for overflow. So just caution on that. I know we've done, not we as a group, I don't know who did it, but I know this town has done that in other areas. It gets very confusing, and after the fact kind of gets lost. And so I would just say, let's try to figure out how do we do that so that our, you know, the folks that have to go enforce this stuff can actually enforce it. Because we keep hearing those enforcement folks come back to us and saying, you guys make all these crazy rules and we don't know how to manage them. And so, but I like them. We do need these rules. And so I would just love to hear from them. And to close, the last one was, and April, I think this is for you. It sounded like there was a lot of back and forth between, did our town engineer give you know, some advice or a thought on, or like weigh in. And it sounded like he did, and I don't debate that. The only question I have is it sounded at the very end like you might have got something in writing. If so, I don't know that I got that. Can we send that around to the board? Because quite honestly, again, this sounds like this is going to be contentious, and I would prefer not to, a year from now, find out that we don't actually have something in writing from our town engineer. I would just say, let's figure that out now. Let's get it. Let's put it in the documents so we know that, you know, the folks sitting around this virtual table feels good about what we're doing.
Okay, is that it, Rich?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. So I am wondering, Allison, if you have email you received from John Thompson, you may want to circulate that to the board, but you can read it or you can convey what it said. I mean, I think people.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that.
This is received, but just to confirm that this is an actual document that came out. And I want to say, I mean, I think excellent that Allison participated in the meeting. I think often we get third-party feedback on what's happened in discussions with our town employees with no one representing the board in the meeting. And so then it is just hearsay. And I think in this case, hearsay, we have someone who works for us who is participating and directly and I can confirm for us. But while Allison's working on that, I agree with you, Rich, on the traffic study piece. I also agree with Cheryl in that we should do a re-look at the traffic in 6 months as opposed to 3 months, because in 3 months they may not have you know, anywhere close to the capacity that they would have at 6 months. And we want to make sure that if we are going back and looking at traffic, that it's a full accounting of what the impacts are. I think what has been recommended and what I would support would be a traffic study that is a scope of work that is developed by our town engineer, because honestly, I'm not a traffic engineer either, and I would prefer that someone working on our team be the one to decide what should be investigated in 6 months. So that would be what I would propose for that. I also would propose that if the traffic turns out in 6 months to be inconsistent with the data that was collected in the traffic study submitted as part of this application, that the applicant have 90 days to work with our town engineer to cure whatever impacts may result. If it's a higher traffic count than has been identified, and we're coming back to the board, but I think just saying there's going to be a traffic study with no outcome isn't really that sufficient. I would suggest something similar with the fire station design committee, that in 6 months after occupancy, that the results of the traffic analysis be reviewed with the fire station design committee, and that at that time I would expect that the fire station design has advanced. And if there are any curb cut issues or anything like that with the fire station, that they should be cured as well. The parking, I also believe that in 6 months' time, we should have a look at the parking management plan and have a determination of whether or not that's working as it was projected to work. And if not, again, that be cured within 3 months' time, or the applicant or the project is no longer in compliance with their permit. I agree with the overflow parking. I think we should put a provision, a condition on the permit that says that parking volumes will be monitored by Little Sprouts, and that when the existing parking cannot accommodate vehicles as a result of special events or employees or any other reason, that an off-site parking with carpooling and shuttle service be utilized. But I agree with Rich in that we need to make sure that whatever that language is, it is enforceable, and that is something that our building inspector is comfortable with. I think we need to include a provision about dark sky compliant lighting. I do agree with the fencing and plantings should be that we should have the stockade fence all the way to Atherton Street on the westerly side, and we should require at a minimum arborvitae along to Atherton, but that perhaps our planning director should have the authority to negotiate an alternate solution with the abutter and the applicant at some future date if needed. And let me see. I think those would be the conditions that I would recommend.
April, just two quick ones.
Yes.
So just to go back, I mean, I've said this already, but just to say again, in no way, shape was I inferring that like conversations or meetings that anybody on this committee or our board has with other groups that I don't agree or believe in. I was merely saying that we were already told by a council that they have plans for litigation, and so I think we aren't doing our due diligence if things aren't completely in writing. That's all.
Yes. So my comment, Rich, about the hearsay wasn't about you.
Okay. All right.
It was somebody else previously in the public hearing saying that this was simply hearsay, and it isn't.
Okay. All right. Makes total sense.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to add to that I think that a town staff member, in this case, Assistant Town Planner Allison Quinn, participated in a meeting and documented it in a memorandum is satisfactory to me in terms of written record.
Right. Okay, so is there any discussion?
I think those conditions are good. And I think we can, flesh them out a little bit, but I think we have what we need. I think we've been concerned all along about what the exits and entrances have been, about the impact on Atherton, about protecting the fire station. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the fire station, design committee in a new budget year. I think that the idea of using the park and ride, and I think taking a 6-month look back makes more sense than 3. because they won't know, you won't know what the student population is going to be, probably at 3. We might not get the right kind of impact at that point.
Did I hear agreement on the condition of the staggered pickup and drop off?
Oh, yes, I meant to say that. Yes, I absolutely agree with that. Do you have any specificity?
Well, it was laid out in their application, April,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
I think we could just use that because that was the justification for the lesser impact.
Yeah, I had it on my list of what you had proposed for conditions, so.
Okay. Okay. I didn't know if I heard other people agree with me on that, that's all.
Yes, I absolutely agree, and I just forgot to say it.
Okay, thank you.
Jenny, did you propose a condition earlier? You had brought it up, and I don't remember what point of the meeting it was in already. Short-term memory loss, but you had proposed a specific type of arborvitae. Is that something that you would like to put in the conditions?
Sure, as long as there is flexibility if for some reason, I don't know, sometimes, I don't know, the COVID or the
COVID takes them all out, they don't make them anymore.
Right, that would be my luck, right? But maybe, well, anyway, I do know that I just looked it up, and thuja, green giant arborvitaes grow really fast and they're deer resistant, and they would be great for this purpose, in my experience. But should we get that specific, or should we say arborvitaes? I mean, there's thousands of different types.
I think our plan says arborvitaes. It doesn't specify the type of arborvitae, but I didn't know if you felt strongly about it and thought you're a resident plant person.
Okay. You know what? They're very common.
Any suggestions?
They're very common, and I would tell the applicant that if they weren't available and they came back, we'd give them something else as quick as we possibly could. So I would suggest putting thuja, green giant, arborvitaes, and a 6-foot stockade fence all the way to Atherton Street.
What about the spacing on the arborvitae? Danny, do you have any suggestion for that?
Yeah, I think it's 5 feet. Let me just check, hold on. Well, you follow the instructions.
Yeah, wouldn't you leave that to an arborist?
I just don't want them too far apart so that they take 10 years to give them the buffer, that's all.
Right.
We can just say to plant it in accordance with best practice.
Best practices. Thank you. In accordance with best practice. Yep.
Excellent.
I got a quick question. So about so this isn't going to sound good but I do have the utmost respect for everybody on the fire station committee, and I understand why they would look at it as it relates to the fire station, but it almost sounded a little bit like they would be looking at it a little bit more so like if we're going to look at, I guess when we were talking about traffic or things after the fact, who is looking at that? Who's making those determinations? Is that just our town engineer? Is that all right?
Yeah, so the town engineer, I think probably what would happen is the applicant would propose a scope of work and the town engineer would tell them whether or not it's sufficient.
Okay.
Or if he felt like there was other things that needed to be done. And perhaps we can just write and in consultation with the fire station design committee, unless you feel that that's not necessary. The reason why I was suggesting it is that there was a question at one point about cut through between 13 and Bradley Road and whether that would create some sort of impact on the fire department. And
well, they'd have to give legal permission. I mean, these guys don't have the right to do work on property they don't own.
No, I totally get it. I just, as long as the town engineer is in there too, and it's not just a fire.
They'd have to because it'd be coming to the town for permission. Because we'd have.
No, that's what I mean, right? But we don't even. You don't even know where the like the fire station committee, are they going to be the same people like a year from now, or are they going to be around?
Maybe we say the fire department then.
All right, cool.
My primary concern is with whether or not, we have all this new signage, which is supposed to prevent cut through, and we have Little Sprouts with their direction to their customers saying you cannot cut through. But, what if people don't heed that and there is an impact? We need to give the opportunity.
Yeah, I get it.
And to Kathleen's point, right, they don't have the opportunity to go in today and say, we're going to put up a gate on your property to Milton Fire Department. However, if there is an impact that's hurting operations of the fire department, and fire department gives them permission and says we need some relief here, I mean, they certainly have, I think, an obligation to attempt to cure the issue.
Now, No, that makes sense. And so the only other thing that I had, that really the only sticking point for me was then that the 15,000, the study, the whatever, we're going to make every effort to make it better. Are we saying, or anyone saying, that we can vote on this tonight, leaving that vague, then add something afterwards?
So I actually have a feeling about that, which I forgot to mention. While I appreciate the gesture, I don't think a $15,000 bond in this case is necessarily the best case. Frankly, the applicant has said all along that they're going to fund a 3-month traffic study, that now we propose a 6-month traffic study. That's their obligation to fund that. And I think we just leave it open-ended, as if the traffic is not consistent with what they have proposed in their application, they need to cure it. I don't know how much that will cost. And if they don't, they're in non-compliance and their permit can be revoked.
But see, I like that better.
Yeah.
Just because what was so uneasy for me is, how do we know that $15,000 cuts it? What are they covering? What if it's 16,000 and they say, you know what, I don't want to do a thing? There's no teeth in any of that. And so now what you're outlining is, at least there is a way back and a conversation, and they have to it sounds like they have to get some approvals, maybe?
Yeah, I agree. I like that better. I mean, because I think the idea of the bond thing was, you do that with subdivision roadways, but you know what they're going to be doing. They're going to be fixing the road. So,
and I like the gesture. I think it's a very positive gesture. We don't always see people volunteering those things or recommending those things, but I don't know what the action would be that would trigger the bond. And it's a short term. I mean, typically you would have a bond for a longer period than 3 months or 6 months. And I'm not sure that that's the right mechanism. I think just leaving it open-ended, that says if your traffic turns out to be a lot more significant than what was proposed, you have to work with the town engineer to figure out how to fix it and mitigate it. And if you can't, you're no longer in operation.
Yeah, I think you said it better than I. I couldn't put my finger on what was going to trigger it. So that makes a lot of sense. Yep.
Okay. Are there any additional deliberations to take place? Okay, I hear none. So what I would entertain a motion to approve the site plan approval application for 919 Blue Hill Ave with the conditions discussed this evening.
I would make that motion.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? We have to do a roll call vote. I will say Rich Feeler.
Yes.
Cheryl Tagayas.
Yes.
Kathleen O'Donnell.
Yes.
Denny Swenson.
So because the applicant did not provide us with the economic feasibility information about a smaller footprint to address the documented safety issues that have been presented to us, I will be abstaining.
And April Anderson, I vote yes. Okay, so what we will do next is Allison will draft a site plan approval with the conditions. We will circulate it to the board and we will circulate it to the building inspector to make sure that all of the provisions in his opinion are enforceable and written appropriately. Circulate it to the board. If at any time the conditions do not look like what you had recommended, we will talk about it on July 9th. But otherwise, we will assume that this is an approval in standing.
And are we going to send it to town council? Did you say that?
Yeah, sure. Yep. We'll send it to town council as well. That's a great recommendation. Okay, thank you. So the next item on our agenda is a scenic road application for 324, 328, 334, 340, and 344 Adams Street. Who is representing the applicant here? Is this Ned Corcoran? Okay. Allison, do you want to just run through this for us, your staff review?
Sure. So, yes, sorry, let me put my glasses back on. The applicants, through their attorney, Ned Corcoran, have filed under the town's scenic road bylaw to install 2 granite piers on each side of a private entry. This application includes the installation of a cobblestone apron between the 2 piers. Their request is to support better visibility of location for mail and package delivery, as well as to define entrance to this private way. Let me see if I can pull up the design for you to look at.
And just a side note that Allison had completed the checklist that we've been using for the applications and circulated as part of the application package. So hopefully,
Do you want me to pull that up as well?
No, I don't think it's necessary. It's
Okay.
more of an administrative thing. I just wanted to make sure the board members saw it and knew.
I did, and I wanted to say thank you.
Yes, I know. That's what I wanted to say also. It helps make our job a lot easier.
Yeah, because I'd never looked at one of those before, so I was like, oh, wow, this is amazing.
I love checklists.
For the public, we have, as part of our administrative review, there is a checklist for each different kind of application that the staff uses to document that the applications are not only complete, but the fees are paid and the appropriate
Yeah, well, that's great.
made and what have you. And so it's a very useful tool for us to make sure we know all of the boxes have been checked. So thank you, Allison.
Sure.
So do you want to pull up that site plan? And Ned, if you want to start while she's pulling it up. I don't know if you can.
Happy
This
to.
is real. Is there another piece to this, Ned?
We don't see it, Allison.
Oh, you can't see it. Oh, for
No.
Lord's sake. What do you guys see? Just out of curiosity. Hope it's not.
Agenda.
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 Oh, and okay. Okay. Yeah. No, I don't want to do that.
I don't know if it's the best way, Allison, but I found that if you stop your screen share and then you have to choose a different file and then start your screen share again, that works.
Okay.
I don't know if it's the best way, but it works.
Lordy, lordy. Okay.
Then you pick the file you want to have open.
Okay. And then.
Again, for the public, this is the first time running this, so thank you for your patience.
Can you see it now?
We can.
Yes, you did it.
Okay.
It's a big
So
piece
Ned.
for me. That's big.
So Allison, did you already suggest that it's your professional opinion the application is complete and ready to be
The
considered?
application's complete. It's consistent with everything else we've seen for scenic road applications. They pointed to existing, and I don't know. I think it looks good.
Okay. Ned?
Thank you. And I want to take a moment to apologize to Denny for the last hearing. I obviously came across inappropriately to you, and I apologize for that. It's never my intention. And we'll have a cup of coffee when this is all over, but I apologize.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. This is an application that's filed on, it's been filed by Michael and Cynthia George, who live at 328 Adam Street, on behalf of the other four owners of themselves and the other four owners of property who share a private way off of Adam Street on Milton Hill. Those addresses are 324, 328, 334, 340, and 344 Adam Street. The Georges, Mark and Patricia Bullman, Raj and Lori Pathak, Edward and Mary Kelly, and Jack Irwin are the other owners. The private way extends off of Adam Street about a quarter of a mile to half a mile, and fairly large properties line both sides. The purpose of this is to provide some definition to the entry to the private way with with two columns that identify the four lot numbers, the addresses of the four properties, so that mail, other deliveries can be made appropriately, other visitors coming in and out. And what they're proposing is simply to add two stone columns, which would be etched with the address numbers. A minor extension of an existing stone wall on the right-hand side as you enter, and then a cobbled apron that crosses the private way. If I can have the next slide.
Hold on, Ned.
All right.
You're doing great, Allison.
So,
Did I go? Is this right, or did I go too far?
this is-
No.
and
Okay.
So what you see is a low stone wall on the right-hand side as you enter, and a larger stone wall on the left. The stone walls are predominantly within the town's right-of-way, so therefore are subject to the scenic road application. The purpose here is to extend the stone wall on the right further down the private way, and to install these two piers, these granite piers, which are which depict private way and with the address numbers as they are depicted here. This is a photo rendering of what it would look like. And then the third slide shows a little bit more detail. And there are similar, and the one on the precedent you can see on the right is one down the street. I don't have the address, but there are, as you go up and down Adams Street, there are other sort of similar columns built at the junctions of these stone walls and driveways and private ways. And so really, I think it's an elegant, simple solution to a problem that's existed for a while relative to directions. Visitors and others coming to and from the five, all of their own driveways come off of the private way. So the private way serves 5 properties. The board actually, a couple of years ago, approved an A&R plan that modified ownership of 2 of the lots, and part of that was work was being done to widen and improve the private way itself. This is simply a sort of a next step that would go with that. And with that, I'd open it up to questions the board may have.
Any of the board members have questions?
Yes. I understand that this was before the Historical Commission, and I see that Stephen O'Donnell, the chair of the Historical Commission, is with us tonight. Can we ask him for what their discussion was, April?
Definitely. Okay, Mr. O'Donnell, can we hear you? Yes.
Good
Thank
evening.
you very much. I saw your friendly face there on the screen the whole time we were talking about Little Sprouts, so thank you for your patience.
You're welcome. A couple of questions, a statement and some more questions. In one place on the application, it says that there will be installation of new stone piers. In another place, it says 2 granite piers. Which is correct?
I would actually ask you to unmute Cynthia George, and I'll ask Michael George to answer that question.
Yes, absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure I understand the distinction. Isn't granite stone?
Granite is a type of stone.
Granite is the most common stone used in all of the, as you see the precedent image here that Ned is sharing in this presentation. It is the most common, I mean, and in fact, it's Quincy granite, Quincy quarry granite in particular is used to line the piers up and down Adams Street. So we chose to be consistent with all of the other piers and all of the other markers for all the other driveways and are using that same stone. That stone happens to be granite.
Okay, but I would assume granite, but it doesn't, but it says stone in one place, granite in another. I just wanted to clarify that indeed it was granite.
Right, thank you.
The Historical Commission has no objection to breaking into the wall to install the pier. Some members, however, do have a couple of questions and comments in this regard. The piers on either side of the driveway don't match. The one on the left has a base, the one on the right does not. Now I realize that the one on the right intersects the wall, but it would seem that if there were a base, the symmetry would be better. These piers are rather large and bulky. The one on the right is almost 4.5 feet high. Now, we realize it's higher on the right because of the left, because of the slope of the land. But a 4.5-foot pier is rather large. They're also 30 inches square, which is dramatically larger than the typical granite piers that you see at the end of driveways on Adams Street, as well as on Canton Avenue, Brush Hill Road. They seem to be much bulkier than necessary to display the 5 numbers that are going to be displayed. And some members questioned whether piers, granite piers with less bulk would be more appropriate in a historic estate area such as this. Thank you.
Great. Ned, you want me to comment or?
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, you guys designed it. It's consistent with what the five of you thought was appropriate for the properties that you own.
That's right. There's a couple of things. One is, you know, and with all due respect, you're right. You know, they're on the larger side, but they are not larger than some of the larger ones that are also on Adam Street. I purposely went up and down and measured and found them anywhere from 24 inches to 42 inches in measure. But to answer your first question about why is there a footing on one side but not on the left, one is that if you notice the one that's on the right, we're trying to keep it consistent with an existing stone wall, which actually comes in contact with the road, you know, with the driveway.
Mm-hmm.
And a plow will hit the footing if there is a little bit of a lip or a footing there. So that's why we chose to make that one straight. Whereas the one on the in this image on the left-hand side is set back off the pavement enough that it's not going to be, you know, in the way of a plow. And it's also a little bit more consistent with some of the style of the other ones. If you notice in the precedent one, it also has a little bit of a footing to it. So we were trying to match and again, stay as consistent as possible. It was a practical measure for plows, you know, for the other side. Do bear in mind that all of the other markers we've talked about up and down Adam Street are typically marking a single home. This is also trying to mark 5 homes. And so if you use a 24 or a 30-inch pillar, for instance, the size of the numbers on that will be so small, you'll be driving by it just as fast as if there weren't one at all. So we did take all of that into consideration, and we found, you know, this size to be suitable, you know, for the purpose.
Mr. O'Donnell, do you have any follow-up or?
No, not really. Again, the commission has no objection to the proposal as submitted.
Okay.
These were questions that came up among the members, and I said I would pass them along for the consideration of the board.
Thank you.
Raised.
Oh, I'm sorry, Cheryl. Did you want to follow up?
If I may, on the right, you have just the words private way, whereas on the left, you have the numbers, whereas the one on the right is taller. Have you thought about putting the numbers on the one on the right and not necessarily extending the stone wall? I was just curious why you chose to extend the stone wall. I'm sorry, he's muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Stonewall,
There you go.
Yeah, Stonewall currently ends at the point where that pier would be placed. There's a further extension of the wall that runs down along the private way behind it.
Yeah, it's really purely for aesthetics. That's right. You know, it looked odd just terminating at that point, so we just extended it. And again, it's an extension along a private way.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna unmute Mr. Pathak or Raj Pathak, who has his hand raised.
Hi, yeah, I just want to, Steve, I'm okay with the size of the stones, but I think they could be smaller. But if they all want to go with a bigger stone, I'm okay with that. But I understand what you're saying, because I was one who was for more of a smaller stone, or granite.
Mr. Pathak, you're one of the homeowners in this?
Oh yeah, I forgot. I'm the owner of 334 Adam Street.
Okay.
So just clarify, April, Mr. Pathak, when you say smaller, do you have a particular interest, whether the width or the height or both?
Probably more so the width than the height.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak? If you're on video, oh, yep. See Ms. Bullman. You should be unmuted.
She may have to unmute herself.
Clicking on mute, but it's not working for some reason.
Hey, is this
Oh,
working?
there we go. Yes, yes.
Yes, hi. I'm Patricia Bowman. I live at 324 Adams. And the neighbors had come into great discussion as to the size and the height of the stone. Currently, right now, we have a white stick on one side that's very narrow. It's very hard to read. And the reason that we did the wider plant, the column, was because it was purely for visibility, for someone driving down the street to see numbers, you know, even though they're in a row, that you would be able to see them going in each direction, you know, east and west on Adam Street to find one of the houses on our private drive. So I just wanted to voice my support for the design that has been submitted.
Thank you. At this point, I would like to unmute everyone, if we can do that. And have anyone who would like to speak up, please do. Are any of the other neighbors on this list of participants, Ned, that you see?
No, I think only Ms. Bowman, Mr. Patak, and Mr. George.
Okay.
One of the things the board has to be aware of, the problem with our area is if you use GPS, it takes you to Cabot Street. It does not take you to our location, only if you use Google Maps. So everybody who comes here has a problem of getting here because it takes you way down there and then it tells you to walk across Cabot Street to our property, which this ain't gonna solve that.
Okay, so I guess, I don't see any other members of the public. I don't hear from anyone who would like to speak up. I guess, Ned, this is a little peculiar of a situation for the board because it sounds like your co-applicants may have a difference of opinion on design. So I'm going to leave this to you to figure out, to advise us on what you think we should do. I mean, we heard from the Historic Commission that they have no objection.
But correct me, April, I thought Mr. Pathak said that if he was agreeable with what all of the rest of his neighbors wanted.
Let's unmute Mr. Pathak and he can.
Yes, I did say that. I just had to voice my opinion when they said all five were in agreement. But I'm not going to object to what the neighbors want. I'm going to be in agreement. I do believe it should be smaller, but if they want to go bigger, I am. But my point is, it's still not going to solve the problem with the GPS problem.
Okay. But you do not oppose the application?
No.
Okay, perfect.
I have a question again, April, if I may, for, I think it was Mr. George, who measured the other ones on the street. The precedent photograph proportionally is taller than it is wide, but the Pier A is kind of squat by comparison. I'm just wondering what you found when you were taking your measurements on others, whether the proportion was more like the precedent photograph or whether there was a mix.
You know, most of the driveways are consistent. In other words, they would be of equal size and height if, in fact, the road was even at the point of entry, which for most driveways, that's the case. Since ours is not a driveway, it's a private road. If you notice, the approach coming from East Milton Square is on an incline. And so to make them of same height, you know, at the top, one has to be taller than the other. We're on an incline. We're not on.
No, I've walked it many times. Yes.
Yeah. So
well. I'm sorry. Maybe I wasn't clear. I was referring more to the width compared to the height. So it's a proportion question.
Yeah. No. We're happy to make them of equal, width if that suits, the committee.
Well, they are equal width now, but if the one on the left, it's just the proportion of it's rather squat. So I'm just trying to address the concern of, I guess, some members of the Historical Commission and perhaps Mr. Pathak, is if the height remained the same so that you could keep your numbers, which I understand the need for this, being able to see the numbers, and that sets the height at 3'7". I was just wondering if you thought that something narrower than 3 feet would be acceptable.
And I guess I would push back the other way and just say that, now you'd have two different pillars.
No, I wouldn't change the width of only one. I would propose it for 2.
Why they should be, I think they should be the same dimension.
Agreed. I don't think you should have one wider than the other. I was thinking it would be applied to both.
So I know that the neighbors spent a lot of time with each other trying to figure this out, and they came out with a plan that everybody was reasonably happy with. And I would just ask the board to approve that.
So I agree with Cheryl, and I agree with the Historic Commission, and I noticed there was some flexibility in the neighborhood. Can we explore that?
So I've unmuted 2 of the 3 neighbors. I don't know, Mr. George, you're not, you might have yourself muted. I'd love to hear some feedback from the neighbors on this. I mean, there's 5 applicants, we have 3 here. So the proposal is to make the columns narrower on both sides. Do we have a measure of what we're suggesting?
I'm suggesting 6 inches.
6 inches narrower than what's proposed?
Correct.
Yes.
So what would that be?
May I ask a question as to, I'm a resident of this private drive. What purpose would the 6-inch less serve?
The scale, that's a question that I heard came from the Historical Commission and one of you 5, and I'm just asking if that's a consideration, because the width is not necessary to achieve enough space for the height of the numbers. So it's a way to address some of the concerns that we've heard.
Well, I think that the neighbors have spent a lot of time and effort looking at designs that that would reflect the Adams Street area and the homes that are here. And we felt that this design did reflect that. This design is going up at a cost of the neighbors. And, we wish to comply with the historical aspects of the secondary road, historical road, Adams Street. But I still feel that it represents the town aesthetically. It represents our drive, which we're keeping aesthetically pleasing. And I think it's a great design. We've waited a long time to have a design like this. And I'm only hoping once the design is finished, maybe the town will actually come and plow this driveway in the winter, which is another issue altogether.
And one that the planning board does not have the authority to fix.
That's too bad. We do maintain this driveway on our own. We plow it, we tar it, and we hope that this board would see the merit in this design as it stands.
Mr. Pathak, do you have some feedback?
No, like I said, I'm okay either way, but if the Historical Commission wants it smaller, I'm okay. But if the neighbors don't, I'm okay. I do got a question though. Is that really a private way or is it a public access?
Oh, it's a private, you've said it's a private way.
Yeah,
And I did look at that, Mr. Pathak, when I was working with the Milton Land Trust. It's a private way.
Okay.
Mr. George, do you have any feedback on the proposal to shrink it 6 inches?
Yeah, thank you. Again, as I think Ms. Bowman, clearly stated very soundly and logically, this is both consistent with the Historic Commission and it's very consistent with all of the other pillars on the street. And I don't see any reason, to go and reduce it. There's no, I appreciate the concern, but it's an unwarranted one based on what is already existing on the street. And so my strong preference would be, as Ms. Bowman noted, we've spent a lot of time, a lot of money, and this has been literally years in the making, had to be resurveyed, I mean, just a lot of work to get here, and to just try to go back and rejigger this, for the sake of causing a change, just doesn't make any sense at all. This is completely consistent with everything else on the street. So we'd ask that it be approved as submitted.
May I ask that Stephen O'Donnell provide us again with the comments that from the Historical Commission relative to scale?
Yes, the commission comment is we have no objection.
Okay.
Some members raised some questions which have been discussed both tonight and apparently previously, and we will not object to the proposal.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I think I would entertain a motion to close the hearing and then we can deliberate.
I would move to close the hearing on the application for, what was it called? Scenic road application for the Adams Street properties.
For 324, 328, 334, 340, and 344 Adams Street.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, Cheryl Tagayas?
Yes.
Roll call vote to close the hearing.
Yes.
Kathleen O'Donnell?
Yes.
Jenny Swenson?
Yes.
Rich Beeler?
Yes.
April Anderson, yes. Okay, let's deliberate. I think we've heard a lot of the comments. I have not shared mine. I feel a little uncomfortable with redesigning a project that's been proposed by neighbors that does not have any objection from the Historic Commission. So I would be inclined to support this application as submitted.
Me too.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Rich, was that a yes from you?
Yes. Yeah.
Kathleen, did you have
Yes.
feedback? Cheryl, did you speak up? I didn't hear who was talking. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I said I'm fine with what you said.
Okay, sorry, I lost track there for a second. You have to keep your eyes glued to the screen at all.
I understand.
Yes, you do. But I would entertain a motion to approve the scenic road application for 324, 328, 334, 340, and 344 Adams Street. Anybody want to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? And let's vote. Cheryl Tagayas?
Yes.
Kathleen O'Donnell?
Yes.
Jenny Swenson?
Yes.
Rich Beeler?
Yes.
April Anderson, yes. Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to the item under new business, Wentworth Farm request to change restricted covenant lot from lot number 2 to lot number 7.
By the way, thank you very much. I'm going to bow off.
You're welcome. Have a good night. Thanks for sticking with us. Allison, I don't know if you have a brief.
I do. Sure. So the background for this.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt you? Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. You've been on the Zoom with us all night, and I really appreciate you sticking with us and the feedback from the Historic Commission. So thank you too.
It really makes a difference. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Sorry, Allison.
That's okay. So this, I'm going to try and move it. This is the plot plan for Wentworth Farm, just to give you a little bit of context. So Wentworth Farm Estates development approved by the board on June 8th, 2017, recorded at book 35276, page 437, and plan book 660, pages 22 through 24, in the Norfolk County Registry of Deeds. So Marina Morrison, the trustee of the, I'm going to say this wrong and I don't intend to, Stoya family irrevocable trust, the owner of the Wentworth Farm development property, through her attorney, Marion McGettrick, requests that the planning board release the existing restrictive covenant on lot 2, which is 24,774 square feet, and instead record a restrictive covenant on lot 7, which is 29,533 square feet. I believe that Kathleen O'Donnell has had some time to review this a little bit, and she might give you a little more insight.
Well, I reviewed the paperwork,
Okay.
but what I didn't get was why are they asking?
Okay, well, that's why we have Marion McKettrick. I think she's on the line.
But I approved the form of it, and there's a little nits we made, but I approved the form of the documents, but I'd be interested to hear why.
All right, let's turn it over to Marion. Are you with us, Marion?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, and you are unmuted, so have at it.
Thank you. It's my understanding that it's simply a matter, the lots are all being marketed. 4 of them have been sold. There is a buyer who's very interested in lot 2. There is no buyer at present for lot 7. They have to maintain this security in some form, and the original covenant does allow the substitution of other forms of security. So the owner and developer are requesting that you substitute a different lot. It's really just a matter of how the lots are being marketed and which ones currently are under discussion for purchase. They can't do anything with lot 2 unless you decide to release it.
Thank you.
So does anybody have questions for Marion? Concerns? And then we can open up to public. No questions for the board? Okay. Let me unmute folks who I believe are on the line, who remain muted. I don't know if that's me. Mike Lynch, are you with us?
I'm here, yep.
Do you have the capacity to unmute everybody in one swipe?
Yep, so everyone actually is unmuted, so
Okay,
if they're,
okay, so they're muted on purpose then, okay. So if anybody wants to speak, speak now or forever hold your peace. I hear and see no one. Can the board just triple check? Okay, so let's discuss. Anybody on the board have any concerns with this request?
April?
Yes.
I was on the board when this project or this application was before us originally.
Yep.
And I have no objection to this request.
Great.
I think it's in the spirit of what we were seeking to do at the time.
Okay. Jenny, any thoughts? Oh, sorry, you're drinking.
I'm in agreement with Cheryl.
Okay. Kathleen,
was I there? Was I already there? I think I was there. I think it was one of my first things with you.
Well, it's really helpful because I had no idea. I mean, I had no idea. So I was like,
Here.
oh. Okay.
That's why I added the commentary.
There you go.
Okay, so if there's no concern, I would entertain a motion to allow for the request to change the restricted covenant for Wentworth Farms from lot number 2 to lot number 7 as proposed.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Nope.
Vote. Rich Beeler.
Yes.
Danny Swenson.
Yes.
Kathleen O'Donnell.
Yes.
Cheryl Tagayas.
Yes.
April Anderson, yes. Okay. Now we are on to old business, which
April, I'm sorry. I should have pointed this out. You know how we had to take off the public hearing?
Yes.
I kept this on as old business, not really realizing that it might be a redundant because you're getting moved.
Well, yes, so that I was just going to say, my inclination when I first saw this revised agenda is to not discuss our old business because we have the public hearing next week. However, Cheryl, we as a board received some comment, and Cheryl Tagayas has spent a significant amount of time trying to work out some work out some improvements to the zoning, and she would prefer that we review that tonight. So I would like to turn it over to Cheryl to.
Can you see this on the?
Allison, you don't have it yet? Are you able
it's
to?
Wentworth Farms still.
Yeah, why don't we let Cheryl control?
Okay.
Yeah, it's probably easier because I can run through it.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, I've got a few things open here. I'm getting to it.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay.
Do you want to just give the context, Cheryl, for the changes?
I am going to just let me get
Okay.
to the top of it. Sorry. Thank you. I'm just going to zoom into this a little bit more too. So a couple of things. as you know, we've received additional comments from Alex Whiteside. And also, I have received comments that I believe I shared, at least with April and Allison, hopefully everyone received. I think actually Michael may have copied all of us. Michael Roberts, who owns the property where the Swift Hat is on Adams Street. So April asked if I would reach out to Alex to see if there were concerns that we could address at this time that might make it easier for all of us at town meeting to consider and whether any revisions would be necessary. And just to give you a little background also, I attended a warrant committee meeting this week, and the warrant is going to press tomorrow. And the warrant committee will likely meet in the coming weeks, but if we wait another 2 weeks to give the warrant committee what we think might be revisions that we would like them to consider, it puts them in a little bit of a crunch before a July 28th town meeting. So I'd like to run through these edits with you, and then if we are in agreement that we want to propose these, they would need to end up becoming the recommendation of the warrant committee, right? Because our article is already submitted. And given the time, I'd like to suggest that if we do vote to recommend this, that we send it to town council for review before we send it to the warrant committee and the select board. So that's why the interest in doing this discussion tonight, okay? So, I met with Alex Whiteside for a couple of hours this morning, and he presented a couple of, or several things which I think I would consider more editorial. For example, like you'll see up at the top here, changing as to for. So I can run through those, I think pretty quickly. Like here, the word town isn't necessary. One of the things that he has recommended was a definition of residential use. He recommended that to us before. I proposed this definition, which defines what we're intending for this to be, which is multifamily housing, so that it's more than one unit within a building or multiple buildings on a property. And then actually giving a definition of housing unit, because we use that term elsewhere under the affordable housing section, but we don't define what a housing unit is. So you can see that's defined here as a portion of a building providing complete housekeeping and cooking facilities for one family. And one family is defined in the definition section of the zoning code. So it makes it consistent in terms of tying it back to how we define family elsewhere. So anybody have any questions about that?
No.
So good so far.
All right. And then this is a different way of saying, I think that what we're trying to say is that under lot coverage, the footprint of historic buildings are not included in the determination of lot coverage. So this, I would say, is language that Alex Whiteside suggested that he thinks is clarifies it better. I don't have an objection to changing it. The same thing here with changing the word section to paragraph. It's more specific and more accurate, actually. And then here to striking this sentence about the height because it's contained elsewhere down further. So it's not necessary to be included here. And then adding the words "a point on Adams Street," which is reflective of the fact that Adams Street slopes. It's more definitive. And then adding a provision that says existing structures maintain their heights and stories. So again, I think this just makes the language more precise, and I don't think it changes the intent. Any questions here?
No.
Nope. Okay. This is actually a good catch because this is just referring to a wall when our intent is to be a wall of a building, because there could be retaining walls. So I think that was a good catch. Again, here, this, there was some discussion that he and I had about what does consistent with other recent improvements mean now, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years. So it just seemed something that would be hard for the board to, a future board to sort of consider, because it's not very definitive. So if you agree, we'll strike it.
Agreed.
Okay. Next is, rather than saying a newly established fund, we had already inserted the name of the fund, so we really don't need this language. I think, again, it's a clarifying. Agreed?
Agreed.
And then under affordable housing unit incentive, again, for a payment as provided, it's not really a fee. Okay, so clarifying the language. Okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, now this one addresses a couple of the comments from Mr. Roberts. Originally, if we look at this first paragraph, at the last sentence, we did have a sentence that said, historic structures, you did not have to count the square footage of those in your maximum floor area calculation. And we had removed that in a recent revision, again, based on Alex's comments. But in the case of a small structure, that might be penalizing, and it could jeopardize the financial viability. So I've inserted here, and I did speak to Alex about this morning as well, is to include up to 1,000 square feet, not of a historic structure that's renovated, not having to calculate towards the FAR. Any questions or concerns about that?
No.
Okay. And then the second part here is adding a provision that allows for reconstruction and rather than restoration, because we know that actually what's been proposed is a reconstruction of the Swift Hat building, and we know the Historical Commission was supportive of that, and the neighborhood was supportive of that. So this actually allows it in this zoning. Any questions about that?
No.
Okay. And then again, here I would say a couple of things here, whether attached or unattached, striking and changing out a couple of words, or just, again, I would say more clarifying language, not changing anything of the intent. And then again, I think a good catch was in the bonus incentive calculation, we had this definition here, and at the end we say multiply it by the bonus factor, but we don't have a definition of the bonus factor. So a planning board in the future that may not have been as heavily involved in this as we are might have a question about what is the intent of that really. So this provides a definition of the bonus factor, and that is the percentage difference between the number of required affordable units and the actual number being provided in the project. So if it's between the 12% and whether it's 17% or 18 or 19 or 20. Everybody clear with that?
Yep.
Okay. Now, this one looks like a lot of red, and I guess it somewhat is, but I won't necessarily need to go through every word of it, but the idea of whether preservation is intended or required, right? Historic preservation. We've had lots of discussion about how zoning can't impose historic districts, but also we, in this as a PUD, have opportunity to require, there's perhaps maybe a little bit of disagreement amongst different parties about whether we can put this requirement of preservation in this overlay. But presuming that it's allowed to be in here, a way to sort of temper concerns that I've had, which was that it would prohibit perhaps some properties from getting redeveloped because a strict requirement of preserving something that had very little historic characteristic left to it may mean that we don't get many applications under this overlay. So what this does is it says that preservation is required, but then in this section here, it says notwithstanding the foregoing, that the planning board can basically waive the requirement. And I think this is one of the points that's been very important to Mr. Whiteside, and it's been very important balance for all of us. And I personally think that this will strike the right balance as a compromise to achieve historic preservation, but allow flexibility.
I'm comfortable with this.
As the person who has been leading the charge on the theory that historic preservation, that it's not legal to create historic districts by planning boards. You need to have historic commissions create historic districts. But in the interest of getting this overlay district over the finish line, I think this language is an acceptable compromise.
Richard, Denny, do you have any questions about that? Okay.
Wait, I think Rich is, hold on.
Rich,
He's
okay,
muted.
he's muted.
I
Okay.
was, but I didn't have any questions. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm going to leave myself unmuted now. Kids are asleep.
Okay.
I don't know what's happening, Rich. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Don't worry about it.
So this ties back to this 1930 also, which we haven't done. There were some things built in the 1950s that you wouldn't necessarily want to preserve. So that I think having a date addresses one of the concerns that not all the buildings are on MACRES, and since this isn't a historic district, they're obviously not in any historic district or protected otherwise at the moment. Okay. Then again, a couple of clarifying, not just renovation, repair, and adaptive reuse, but these others. And there, he had, Alex had suggested that signage shouldn't be just in the design standards, which we can waive, but we can have something there, but also direct the applicants to the actually appropriate place in the zoning bylaw for signs in the business districts. So I think that's a good catch too. I don't know if you care about this, Kathleen, but this was something that was suggested. I don't see any comments coming from Kathleen on this.
On the signage?
No, here, the extent.
On the what?
Right here, where my cursor is. Can you see it?
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, it says permissible. Yeah. Like permissible by the Wizard of Oz or permissible by wherever. Yeah.
All right. The other major issue, parking. And we all know that he sent us memos about parking and the requirements. And he had made a suggestion that we should have a greater minimum parking requirement. And we talked about this quite a bit. And I suggested that I would be more comfortable keeping the minimum as it is, but putting a provision in that the planning board could request more parking if it, after consideration, felt that it was necessary. And that's what this language does. So and it does it for the business and for the residential district. Yes.
I think I've probably been the most outspoken on this issue. I think one per thousand and one per unit is more than sufficient. However, in the spirit of compromise, I can live with this language. I don't like it at all, but I can live with it.
It's all in the spirit of compromise after.
And out of respect for Alex Whiteside, who I do cherish and appreciate his feedback, I'm gonna defer to you, Cheryl. If you think this works, then I'll go with it.
You know, I think having flexibility, some of this language gives the planning board flexibility, which I think is something we all have found is important, because each application has its own characteristics. Oh, Denny's waiting.
Oh, Denny left.
We lost her. Let's see if she has any questions about the parking.
Sorry, I got bounced out twice.
Did you hear then, Denny?
I didn't hear the parking.
All right, so did you hear the signage?
Yes.
Okay, So the parking, as I said, we all know that Alex had suggested that our minimum parking requirements were not adequate. And as April said, she has felt that these are more than adequate. And so I made the suggestion to Alex, which he thought was reasonable also, that we keep our minimum parking requirements, but that we put in a provision that the board may increase the minimum spaces required for an applicant, after consideration of their application and their particular project and the program mix that it has. And that's both for the commercial or the business and the residential.
And my comment, Denny, was that I think I've been the most outspoken on this, and I don't love the change, but in deference to the negotiation that has happened and with due respect to Cheryl and Alex, I'm willing to support it.
Okay, so again, these are, I don't see as being significant modifications, more clarifying.
No, yeah.
And I think this is probably a good add here too, to kind of to Rich's point earlier, that if there is an impact, what are we doing about it?
Oh shoot, she got kicked off
She got
again.
bumped again. Yeah, let's see if she heard all of the parking.
Oh, you're not going to believe this. It was like you got to the punchline and I lost you again. Okay, so what did you guys decide to do?
We decided,
we're going along with Alex's, compromise, which is to say that, we have the right to bump up the parking if the use is something, that seems to require it.
And I just want to make a comment. Cheryl said, is this flexibility, which if this is what closes the deal, then fine. But I do oppose or object to the idea that we want flexibility in our zoning. I actually think we would get a much better result if our zoning was more clear and less discretionary and less flexible, because then applicants would know what we're trying to achieve. And I think it's more confusing when we leave it flexible and open-ended, and then we get what we get and we can try to negotiate it on the fly. But personally, I think if you are less discretionary and more clear about what your standards are, you get a better result.
I absolutely agree with you, but I just don't want to be doing a Zoom meeting on July 28th where we end up having a knockdown, drag out fight over,
Me neither. That's why I'm agreeing to this, but I'm just.
Well, that's why, April, the compromise was to keep what we felt was right in here and then allow some discretion, right? So that's why keeping the 1 per 1,000, the 1 per unit.
And it's fine that people have different opinions. It's just a different strategy, right?
So then, Denny, again, these were not.
I think
significant. Is she still here? Okay.
Yeah.
Clarification here, which is, I think, a good add. And here, a good add, that you actually have mitigating strategies that need to be proposed, not just identifying issues. Again, additional language on what's required in the historic preservation incentive submission when that application comes in, just a little clearer. This reference is, she lost her again. She keeps bumping out.
She was just texting me that she's trying to log back in.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry, guys. Well, I think we've been through this debate many times, and I think you all know where I'm at. So I'm glad that Cheryl and Alex came to a place, and we can move beyond.
All right. So I think, my understanding is that with these changes that Alex Whiteside will not be proposing amendments, any further amendments. That's my understanding from our conversation. And as I said earlier, we took into consideration some additional comments that we had received from Michael Roberts. So those are the changes that I would propose that we vote to accept and recommend to the warrant committee. but before sending it to the warrant committee, that we send it to town council for review.
So I think we should, somebody should make that motion. Or do you
I
want
would make the motion to send these revised version of the Milton Village Overlay District to Town Council and to the Warrant Committee. Or to the Warrant Committee, I actually sent it to the Warrant Committee and Town Council at the same time, because you really don't want to be wasting days.
Well, my suggestion, understanding what this kind of language and the warrant committee, getting two of these, getting a second revision that may come from Kevin might be a little harder to fit into a schedule. I'd like to check with town council to see how quickly he could review it. So how about the motion be that we submit it to the warrant committee, subject to town council review, and we can figure out how that date's going to work out. Is that?
I would accept that idea, because I mean, as a former town council myself, we always reviewed the warrant before it went to press. So, I mean, all of it. So it's not any different than what he'd be doing anyway.
Right. I mean, so if you think about like each of these amendments, I've attended warrant committee meetings and reviewed the changes with them. Yeah. And if we could get his comments before we send it to them, then it's one meeting rather than two that we need to fit it in. That's my only concern.
Yep. Okay. Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? Okay, then let's do a roll call vote. Denny Swenson?
Yes.
Rich Beeler?
Yes.
Cheryl Tagayas?
Yes.
Kathleen O'Donnell?
Yes.
April Anderson, yes. So we'll send these along, and I just want to point out that Cheryl has spent so much time on this. Like,
oh my gosh.
She attended
round of applause for Cheryl.
She attended the warrant committee meeting. She's reviewed the warrant language. She caught a few issues with that. So thank you. And I also, on a personal note, just want to say thank you so much, Cheryl, because over the last 2 weeks, she has helped me tremendously figure out what the heck I'm supposed to be doing. So I want to thank you for that. I appreciate it. And I'm excited to see this finally hit the floor of town meeting, or the virtual floor of town meeting on July 28th.
Can I just make one more comment, April? Thank you for that, by the way. That the webinar is now going to be, it had to be rescheduled. I think you're all aware of that via email. But just for people who may be watching, we are preparing a webinar which will go through and explain this zoning in, I think, a ways that's going to be easier for folks to understand. It's going to be taped on Tuesday the 30th, and it will be available on the Milton Access TV website for viewing on demand. And we hope that everyone, particularly town meeting members, will take the opportunity to watch that before town meeting.
Yes. Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Wheeler.
Yes.
Cheryl Tagayas.
Before I say yes, thank you, April, for taking on the chair position. Now, yes. Denny? Oh, sure. We lost her again.
Kathleen O'Donnell.
Yes, and thank you, April.
You're welcome. Thank you. April Anderson, yes. And we will see each other again on July 9th. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, all.